Noah Carter swung open his bedroom door and froze. A woman was in his bed. Not just any woman. Victoria Hayes, his boss, the CEO whose name was on the building. The woman who had never once looked at him for longer than it took to say good morning in a hallway. She was curled under his daughter's dinosaur quilt, still wearing her work clothes, mascara faintly smeared beneath her eyes. And when she opened them and saw him standing there with a baseball bat in his hand, she didn't scream. She didn't run. She just looked at him exhausted, broken, stripped of everything that made her untouchable, and whispered, "Noah, can I stay?" He had 1,000 reasons to say no. He said none of them. And that one quiet decision was about to turn both their lives completely upside down. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, subscribe right now, because this one doesn't stop here. The rain had been falling since 4 in the afternoon. Not the soft Pacific Northwest kind of rain that locals bragged about, the kind that barely qualified as rain at all, more like the sky breathing heavy. No, this was the other kind. The kind that drummed against car roofs and turned gutters into rivers and made every streetlight look like it was bleeding orange into the asphalt. Noah Carter drove home in it with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. He did that, sometimes drove in silence. Not because he was at peace, but because silence was the only thing that didn't ask anything of him. Music reminded him of Julia. Talk radio reminded him of the world moving forward. Silence just let him drive. He was 40 minutes late leaving the Hayes Global building, which put him home at 11:22 p.m. on a Friday when most men his age were either watching college football or already asleep in a warm bed next to someone who loved them. Noah didn't have either of those things, and most nights he'd made his peace with it. Most nights. He pulled into the driveway of the small craftsman house on Ridgeline Avenue and sat there for a second with the engine running, watching the rain bounce off the hood of his truck. The house was dark. Emma was at his mother's place for the weekend. That had been the plan. Give his mom some time with her granddaughter, give himself 48 hours of something that was supposed to feel like rest, but never really did. The house was always too quiet without Emma in it. Too big for one man. Too full of things that used to mean something. He cut the engine and grabbed his jacket off the passenger seat. That's when he noticed it. Parked at the curb, half in the shadow of the old maple tree, was a black Escalade. Clean, new. The kind of vehicle that cost more than Noah made in 2 years. He didn't recognize it. Nobody on his block drove anything like that. His neighbor Dale drove a 2009 Silverado with a cracked taillight, and his neighbor on the other side, Mrs. Kowalski, hadn't owned a car since her husband passed in 2019. Noah stood in the rain and looked at that Escalade for a long moment. He told himself it was probably nothing. Somebody visiting from out of town. A wrong address. He'd had a 12-hour shift, and his lower back was reminding him of every hour of it, and all he wanted was a shower and 6 hours of sleep before he had to be a functional human being again. He went inside. The front door was unlocked. He always locked the front door. Noah stopped in the entryway. His hand found the light switch. He flicked it. The living room came up, the same mismatched furniture he'd bought secondhand after the divorce, the framed drawings Emma had made him for his birthday. The old leather couch with the patched armrest. And a suitcase. A designer suitcase, the hard-shell kind, graphite gray, with gold hardware, sitting right next to his couch like it had always belonged there. Noah stared at it. There was a coat draped over the back of the couch. A woman's coat. Charcoal wool, expensive, cut, the kind of thing that didn't come off a rack at Nordstrom Rack. It came from somewhere with a French name and a waiting list. The air in the house smelled different. A perfume he couldn't name, something subtle and serious, the kind that didn't announce itself but settled into a room and stayed. He should have called 911. He knew that. He knew that's what a rational person did when they came home to an unlocked door and a stranger's suitcase and a smell that wasn't theirs. He even reached for his phone. But something stopped him. Not logic. Not bravery. Something slower and stranger than either of those, a feeling almost like recognition, though he couldn't explain why. He walked to the kitchen instead. Turned on that light. Nobody there. Coffee maker undisturbed. Nothing moved. Nothing opened. He went down the short hallway. Emma's room door open empty. Her stuffed giraffe sitting on the pillow where he'd left it. Then his bedroom door. Closed. He never closed his bedroom door when Emma wasn't home. No reason to. Noah put his hand on the knob and held it there for 3 full seconds. Then he pushed it open. The bedside lamp was on. The low one on the nightstand on the left side, the side that used to be Julia's side, the side nobody slept on anymore. The quilt was pulled up, and underneath it, head on the pillow, still wearing what looked like dress pants and a silk blouse, was a woman. Noah's brain needed a full 3 seconds to process what his eyes were telling him. He knew that face. Everyone in the building knew that face. It was on the portrait in the main lobby, 8 feet tall, professionally lit, the kind of photo that was supposed to communicate power and competence, and a complete absence of uncertainty. He'd walked past it every morning for 4 years. He'd never once thought about the person behind it, the way he was thinking about her now. Victoria Hayes, asleep in his bed. His first thought was that he was more tired than he'd realized, and this was some kind of stress-induced hallucination. His second thought was that he was going to lose his job. His third thought, and he would spend a long time later trying to understand why this was his third thought and not his first, was that she looked exhausted. Not just tired, exhausted. The way people looked when they'd been holding something heavy for a very long time and finally put it down. He stepped back. His shoulder hit the doorframe. The small noise was enough. Her eyes opened. They were dark brown, which he hadn't known. From a distance, from across a conference room, he was repairing the HVAC, and they'd always seemed darker, almost black. But up close in the low light of his second-hand bedside lamp, they were brown, plain, human. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything for what felt like a very long time. Then Victoria Hayes, CEO of Hayes Global Technologies, the woman whose signature was on his paychecks, the woman whose name was on the building, slowly sat up, pushed her hair back from her face, and said in a voice that was quieter and rougher than he'd ever heard it, "Noah, I'm sorry. I didn't think you'd be home this late." He didn't know what he'd expected her to say. That wasn't it. He stopped, started again. "How did you get into my house?" "The property management system," she said. And then, reading his face, "The company owns this development. I have master access to the lock codes. I know how that sounds." "It sounds like breaking and entering." "Technically, it's authorized access." "To your employee's bedroom." She looked down at the quilt. The quilt Emma had picked out herself, dinosaurs on a cream background, which Noah had never bothered replacing with something more adult, because he was in the room by himself, and it didn't matter. He watched Victoria Hayes sitting in his daughter's dinosaur quilt, and felt something shift in him that he couldn't quite name. "No?" she said quietly. "Not to your bedroom. I was going to sleep on the couch. I sat down in here for a minute and I fell asleep. I haven't slept in 4 days." He should have told her to leave. He thought about it, stood there in his own bedroom doorway, in his wet jacket and his work boots, 12 hours of physical labor in his body, and thought about saying, "Ms. Hayes, I don't know what's happening, but you need to go." He could say it politely. He could call her a car, make sure she got somewhere safe, and then go to bed and spend the rest of the weekend trying to forget this happened. He almost did it. But 4 days. 4 days without sleep. He knew what that did to a person. He'd done it once, after the divorce was finalized, when Emma was at his sister's, and he sat alone in an apartment he hated, and couldn't make his brain turn off, no matter what he tried. 4 days wasn't just tired. 4 days was a person at the end of something. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She looked up. "What? Are you physically hurt? Did something happen to you?" "No." A pause. "Not the way you mean." He exhaled. "Okay." He pulled his jacket off, hung it on the hook behind the door. "The guest room's the second door on the right. The bed's made. There are clean towels in the cabinet above the toilet." She stared at him. You're not going to ask me to leave. You said you haven't slept in 4 days. I'm your boss. I know who you are, Ms. Hayes. I broke into your house. You said it was authorized access. Something crossed her face, not quite a smile, more like a muscle that had forgotten how to make one, trying to remember. You're not afraid of me. Should I be? She looked at him for a long moment. Most people are. Most people work for you, Noah said. Right now you're sleeping in my house under my daughter's dinosaur quilt. That changes the power dynamic a little. This time, something did move in her face. Not a smile exactly, but the ghost of one. Something tired and real and very different from the face in the lobby portrait. The guest room, she said. Second door on the right. She stood. She was still in her dress clothes, the blouse, the slacks, heels that she'd set neatly beside the nightstand. She picked up the heels. She looked standing there in her stocking feet, much smaller than he'd expected. The woman he saw in the building always seemed to take up more space than her actual body. In his bedroom, in the low light, she seemed almost ordinary. Almost. She moved past him toward the door. Then she stopped. Noah. Yeah. Can I stay? Not just tonight. A few days. She stopped. Pressed her lips together. He could see her deciding whether to say the next part, and he could see the moment she decided against it and swallowed it back down. I'll explain in the morning, if you want me to. He should have said no. Any reasonable man would have said no. Second door on the right, he said again. There's an extra blanket on the shelf if you need it. She nodded. She walked down the hallway. He heard the guest room door open and close. Noah stood in his own bedroom for a while after that, in the dark, listening to the rain. He didn't sleep well, not because he was unsettled, or not only because of that. He kept turning over the same question, the one he should have asked before he let her walk down that hallway. Why here, Victoria Hayes had a house in Medina that he'd seen photographed in Seattle Metropolitan Magazine. 6,000 square feet. Lake views. A kitchen that cost more than his truck. She had resources that most people couldn't imagine. Hotels, corporate apartments, a personal assistant who could arrange anything on 4 hours' notice. Why his house? He was up by 6:15 earlier than usual, even for him. He made coffee the regular kind, the stuff he bought in the orange can because it was on sale, which struck him as absurd now. In a way it hadn't been 12 hours ago, and he sat at his kitchen table and drank it and listened to the house. She was still there. He could hear faintly the guest room radiator doing the thing it always did, the low rattle that he'd been meaning to fix for 2 months. He pulled out his phone and looked up her name. He didn't need to. He knew the broad strokes everyone at Hayes Global did, in the way employees know things about their CEO, through a combination of official communications and cafeteria gossip, and things overheard in hallways. Victoria Hayes had founded the company with her husband, Marcus Hayes, 13 years ago. They'd grown it from a 40-person software startup into a regional technology firm with over 800 employees. They were the Seattle success story, the power couple, the kind of people who showed up at charity galas and smiled at cameras and made other people feel like the world was exactly the way it was supposed to be. Marcus Hayes had filed for divorce 14 months ago. Noah remembered that. It had gone through the building like a tremor, not a big one. Not something that knocked things off shelves, but the kind you felt in your feet and couldn't quite dismiss. People had speculated. People always speculated. He hadn't participated in it. It wasn't his business. He put his phone down. He heard the guest room door open. Victoria appeared in the kitchen doorway at 6:47 a.m. She'd changed different clothes from the suitcase. He assumed something simpler. Dark jeans and a plain sweater that looked like it cost $300 despite looking like nothing at all. Her hair was down. She wasn't wearing any makeup, or if she was, it was the kind that disappeared into her face. She looked less like a CEO. She looked like a person who'd had 4 hours of sleep after 4 days of none, which was exactly what she was. She looked at the coffee maker. "Please," he said, and got up to pour her a cup. She sat down at his kitchen table. He set the mug in front of her. She wrapped both hands around it and didn't say anything for a while, and neither did he. Finally, she said, "You didn't tell me what to do last night." "What?" "I've had people telling me what to do since I walked into my office Monday morning. Lawyers, PR people, my board, even my housekeeper. Everyone had a plan. Everyone had an opinion about what was best for me." She looked into the mug. "You just said second door on the right." Noah sat back down with his own coffee. "It's your life, not mine to manage." That's not a common perspective. "Maybe you've been around the wrong people." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "My ex-husband has been leaking proprietary information to our competitors for 8 months. I found out on Monday, not from our legal team, not from a whistleblower. I found a file on a shared server that had been moved twice. Someone was covering tracks badly. I followed it." She said it all in a flat, matter-of-fact voice, like she was reading from a report. "His name is on everything. He's been doing it since the separation. Maybe before." Noah said nothing. He let the words land. "He says if I pursue legal action, he'll go to the media with a narrative about me, about my competence, about the company's stability. He has a pause. He has documentation. Things from our personal life. Conversations. Emails. He's been collecting it for a long time. Long enough that I think he knew when we separated that this was where we'd end up." "Did you talk to your attorneys?" "My attorneys want me to settle, quietly. They say the cost of a public fight isn't worth the outcome even if I win." "What do you want?" She looked at him. It seemed to take her a moment to process the question, like it was in a language she understood but didn't hear often. "I want to burn it to the ground," she said. Then, "But I also want to be able to look at myself in a mirror in 10 years. Those two things are in conflict." Noah wrapped his hands around his mug. "Why here, Ms. Hayes?" "Victoria." "Why here, Victoria?" She turned the mug slowly in her hands. "Do you remember the Meridian Street facility 4 years ago? The server room flood?" He remembered. August, busted pipe in the ceiling. We lost cooling to 3 server racks over a holiday weekend. You were the only maintenance personnel who stayed. Everyone else had logged out. You stayed for 19 hours. You and one of your guys, Ramirez. You brought in portable cooling units from 3 different locations. You rerouted the backup power manually because the automated system wasn't responding. You kept 400 jobs worth of data from going offline. She looked at him. "Do you know what that weekend cost if we'd lost that data?" "I didn't do math on it." "I did. $14 million in potential losses. Insurance would have covered some, not all." A pause. "I tried to give you a bonus. I remember. I didn't take it." "I know. You said it was part of the job." She looked at the table. "I've had a lot of people work for me. A lot of people who did things for recognition, for advancement, for money. And then there was you who just fixed it and went home." "I like fixing things," Noah said. "It's what I do." "I know." She finally looked up. "And I'm 40 years of broken right now, and I don't trust anyone in my world. And I needed—" She stopped. Her jaw tightened. He could see her fighting something, some reflex trained over years of never showing weakness. "I needed somewhere that felt safe. And for some reason, the only place I could think of was the house of a man I've never had a real conversation with." She let out a breath. "Which I realize is insane." "Little bit," Noah said. "I can go. If you want me to go, I'll go." He looked at her across his kitchen table in her expensive, simple sweater with her unwashed hair and 4 hours of sleep on her face and all $400 million of her life in pieces. And he thought about the thing he'd been sitting with since 6:15, the question he'd turned over and over. Why here? Because sometimes people knew something their brains didn't have words for yet. And sometimes the place that felt safe was the most unexpected one. And sometimes a man who spent his whole life being invisible was the only one someone could trust because he'd never wanted anything from them. He stood up and poured himself more coffee. You want eggs? He asked. She blinked. I what? Eggs. I've got a dozen. Emma usually does scrambled, but I can do them other ways. Victoria Hayes stared at him. You're making me breakfast. I'm making myself breakfast. You can have some if you want. She was quiet for a moment. Something in her face went through a change he couldn't fully read, like something tightly wound beginning very slightly to loosen. Scrambled is fine, she said. He turned to the stove. Noah. He looked back. Thank you, for last night, for not... She stopped, tried again. For just saying second door on the right. He turned back to the stove and cracked the first egg against the edge of the pan. Third drawer on the left has the silverware, he said. Help yourself. They didn't talk much over breakfast. That was fine. Noah had spent enough of his life in situations where silence was uncomfortable. The silence after Julia told him she'd been unhappy for 2 years. The silence in the mediator's office when they'd divided up things that used to be theirs. The silence in Emma's room. The first night his daughter cried herself to sleep in the new house, and he sat in the hallway outside her door with his back against the wall because he didn't know what to say. That would be true, and also not break her heart. He'd made his peace with silence. Victoria, he could tell, hadn't. She ate methodically good appetite, he noted, which told him she hadn't been eating any better than she'd been sleeping. She kept looking up at the kitchen, at the drawings on the refrigerator, at the small things that accumulated in a house where a child lived. The crayon marks on the doorframe that he hadn't had the heart to paint over the height marks Emma had insisted on keeping the little ceramic frog on the windowsill that she'd made in art class and presented to him with the absolute seriousness of an artist debuting a masterpiece. How old is she? Victoria asked. 8, 9 in March. She's good? She was looking at a drawing on the refrigerator. Emma's version of their house, the two of them standing in front of it. Emma with yellow hair. She'd recently decided she wanted yellow hair, which Noah had navigated by explaining that natural colors were also beautiful, which had not satisfied her, but had tabled the argument, and Noah rendered as a very tall rectangle with a face. She captured your energy, Victoria said. Noah looked at the drawing. At the rectangle. That's one word for it. I didn't have... She stopped. What? Nothing. She shook her head. He waited. She said it anyway. I didn't have drawings on my refrigerator. Growing up, my mother wasn't... She turned her attention back to her plate. It doesn't matter. He didn't push it. She helped him with the dishes without asking, just stood up and started doing it, which surprised him. He'd half expected her to sit there while he cleaned up, not out of rudeness, but out of simple unfamiliarity. He'd known people like that, people so far removed from the ordinary mechanics of a household that they simply didn't register that dishes needed doing. But she filled the sink, ran the water, and washed while he dried, and they stood side by side in his small kitchen, doing the most ordinary thing in the world. Your ex-husband, Noah said. He knows where you are. She was quiet for a beat. Not yet. He knows I left the house. He doesn't know where I went. He'll look. Yes. You have security. I have 2 people on retainer. I told them to stand down for the weekend. I needed... She handed him a plate. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't surrounded by people on my payroll. You could have gone to a hotel. He has people in hotels, or he will once he starts looking. Marcus is very good at finding things out. It's one of the things I admired about him. A pause. For a long time, Noah thought about that, about being so thoroughly outmaneuvered by someone who was supposed to love you that even your escape routes weren't safe. He thought about Julia. That wasn't the same situation, not even close. Julia had been unhappy, and she'd left, which was a different kind of wound than betrayal. But the landscape of having someone who knew you completely suddenly become a threat, that part he understood in his bones. He doesn't know about this house, Noah asked. He knows the company owns the development. He doesn't know which unit I'd go to or who lives here. There's no connection between us in any file he'd have access to. She handed him the last mug. I know how to use information too. I've just spent 13 years pretending I didn't need to." He dried the mug and set it on the shelf and turned to face her. "I have to ask you something," he said. She turned off the water and looked at him. "Okay. Does this put my daughter at risk?" She held his gaze, didn't flinch. "I've thought about that. If I thought there was any chance of it, I would have gone somewhere else. Marcus is vindictive, but he's strategic. Harming a child or a civilian employee isn't in his playbook. It would destroy him faster than anything I could do." "You're certain?" "No," she said. "I can't be certain. I can tell you that I believe it with everything I know about him. And I can tell you that if anything changes, I will be gone from here in 10 minutes, and I will make sure you and your daughter are protected." He studied her face. 12 hours ago, he would have said he didn't know her. He still barely did. But there was something in the way she'd said it, not a promise, not a performance, just a statement of what she intended that landed differently than the smooth corporate assurances he'd been hearing all his career. She meant it. "Okay," he said. "Okay. You can stay." She let out a breath. It was small, barely there, but he caught it, and he understood that something in her had been waiting for that word since last night, maybe longer. "I'll stay out of your way," she said. "I have work I can do remotely. I'll make my calls in the guest room. You won't even know I'm here." "Emma gets back Sunday evening," Noah said. "She'll know you're here." Victoria paused. "What do you want to tell her?" He thought about it. The truth, more or less. A friend needed a place to stay for a while. "She'll have questions." "Emma always has questions." He picked up his coffee mug. "She gets it from me." Victoria almost smiled again, getting closer. Yeah. Saturday was quiet, in the way that the best Saturdays were. No urgency, no crises, just the sound of rain on the windows and the ordinary work of a house in need of small repairs. Noah spent the morning doing the things he'd been putting off: the radiator in the guest room that he fixed in 20 minutes. Once he actually got to it, a stuck drawer in the kitchen, a light fixture in the hallway that had been buzzing for a month. He worked without making a production of it, the way he always worked. Things needed fixing. He fixed them. Victoria sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and worked in focused silence, the kind of silence that had its own particular quality, dense, purposeful, like a held breath. He could see from the way she moved through documents and calls that she was building something, collecting something. Whatever she was doing with her ex-husband's situation, she wasn't just weathering it. Around noon, she closed the laptop and came to stand in the doorway of the hallway, where he was replacing the fixture housing. "You do this at home too," she said. "House doesn't stop needing things done just because I'm off work." She watched him for a moment. "My father was a mechanic. I haven't thought about this in years, the way he used to fix things. He'd come home smelling like grease, and he'd still go straight to whatever was broken in the house because he couldn't walk past something and leave it unfixed." Noah glanced at her. "What happened to him?" "Heart attack. I was 23. She leaned against the doorframe. "He didn't live to see any of it. The company. The all of it." Would he have been proud? She thought about it. Which he sensed was different from how she usually answered that question. Usually the answer was automatic. A public-facing answer. The story of the immigrant mechanic's daughter who built something out of nothing. "He would have been worried," she said finally. "He always said money made people into strangers. He didn't mean it badly. He just meant you stop being surprised by things. You stop being grateful. Everything becomes..." She searched for the word, owed. Noah came down off the step stool. "You think he was right. I think I've had a lot of things, and I ate dinner alone most nights for the past 2 years. She looked at the fixed light fixture, then at him. "I think the things and the loneliness weren't unrelated." He started packing up the toolbox. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Go ahead." "Your divorce. You don't have to answer." "I don't mind." "What happened?" He snapped the toolbox shut and thought about how to say it. He'd gotten better at this over 3 years, at saying it in a way that was true, but not a wound being reopened. "She said I was good at fixing everything except the marriage," he said. She wasn't wrong. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry. It's the most useful thing I've ever been wrong about. What do you mean? He picked up the toolbox. Took me a long time to figure out that fixing things and being present for people aren't the same skill. Emma taught me that. Kid doesn't want me to solve her problems. She wants me to sit with her while she has them. He moved past Victoria toward the kitchen. Still working on it. She turned to watch him go. She's lucky, she said to his back. He stopped. Didn't turn around right away. When he did, she was still in the doorway, and the expression on her face was one he couldn't quite read. Something wistful and honest and undefended, like something she hadn't meant to let him see. Lucky's not the word I'd use, he said. She's had a harder 3 years than she should have. She has you. Most days I'm not sure that's enough. It is, Victoria said. You'd know if it wasn't. He stood there for a moment looking at her, and he thought, 3 days ago, I didn't know this woman's eye color. He thought, this is the strangest weekend of my life. He thought, she's right. Saturday evening, after a dinner that neither of them planned or discussed. He cooked, she sat at the counter and talked to him while he did. And somewhere in the middle of it, they'd just been talking. The easy way people talked who weren't performing for each other. He made them both coffee, and they sat in the living room, and she told him about Monday. Not the version she'd told attorneys, not the press-ready version, the real one. She'd come in early before her assistant arrived. She'd been running through quarterly figures the way she always did, not because she had to, her CFO handled the numbers, but because she couldn't not. Numbers told her things that people obscured. She'd pulled the access logs for the main data partition, and she'd seen a transfer flagged and buried from 8 months ago. She'd followed it for 4 hours alone in her office before she understood what she was looking at. You know what the worst part was, she said. She was looking at the coffee mug, not at him. It wasn't the betrayal, it wasn't the loss, it was that I wasn't surprised. She exhaled slowly. I'd known something was wrong for a year, maybe longer. I'd built such a large, elaborate structure of reasons not to look at it, because looking at it meant the whole thing was exactly what I was afraid it was. What were you afraid of? She finally looked up at him. That I'd been alone for a very long time. That the marriage was another structure I'd built like the company, like the public image, like all of it, and that if I looked at it honestly, there was no one actually inside it, just the structure. A pause. And that maybe I'd built it that way on purpose. Because it was safer. Noah held his mug in both hands. And was it safer? For a while. She turned the mug. And then it wasn't. And there was nobody to call. Everyone I knew was a colleague, or a contact, or someone who wanted something from me. There was no one to call and say, I'm falling apart a little. Can you just be here? She stopped. So I got in the car and drove. And I ended up here. He said quietly, I'm glad you did. She looked at him, not because, he stopped careful. Not for any complicated reason, just because you needed somewhere to land. And the guest room was empty. That's a simple equation. Victoria held his gaze for a long moment. Something in it was searching the way you looked at a thing you suspected might be real, but weren't sure enough to trust yet. You're a strange man, Noah Carter, she said finally. My mother says the same thing. Is she right? He thought about it. Probably. She smiled. A real one, small and unexpected, cutting across her face like something that hadn't had enough practice. He felt it land somewhere in his chest in a way he wasn't prepared for, and deliberately didn't examine too closely. Get some sleep, he said. You're 3 days behind. She nodded and stood, moved toward the hallway. Victoria, she turned. You said you wanted to burn it to the ground, he said. The situation with your ex-husband. I did say that. Do you have enough? She looked at him steadily. Almost, she said. I need 2 more things. I know where they are. I just needed 48 hours to stop running and think clearly enough to get them." He nodded. She said, "Good night, Noah." "Night." She went down the hallway. The guest room door closed. He sat in the living room for a while in the quiet, listening to the rain which had finally lightened to something the locals would call typical. The framed drawings on the wall, the ceramic frog on the windowsill, the patched armrest on the couch. The house felt different, not crowded, not invaded. Different in a way he was going to have to think about carefully later when he had more distance from it. Different in a way that reminded him for the first time in 3 years that quiet and alone weren't the same thing, that a house could feel like something other than an echo of what used to be in it. He turned off the living room light and went to bed. Tomorrow Emma would come home, and everything would get more complicated. And somehow sitting alone in the dark he didn't mind. Sunday morning came in quiet and gray, the kind of morning that didn't announce itself, just arrived. Noah was already up at 5:45, standing at the kitchen counter, with his second cup of coffee, running through the mental list he always ran through on Sundays. What Emma needed for the week. What he had to prep at the job site Monday. Whether he'd remembered to sign her permission slip for the class field trip. Normal things. The machinery of a normal life. Except there was a woman sleeping in his guest room who had $300 million and a crumbling empire, and an ex-husband who played dirty, and Noah Carter was the only person she'd trusted enough to run to. He poured the coffee and tried not to think too hard about what that meant. He heard her before he saw her. The guest room door. The creak of the second floorboard from the end he'd been meaning to fix that for 6 months. And then she was in the kitchen doorway again. Same dark jeans, different sweater, hair pulled back this time. She looked like she'd slept. Not enough, but some. "How long have you been up?" she asked. "While." "You always up this early?" "Emma's a 7 a.m. riser on weekends. I've been conditioned." She moved to the coffee pot without asking. Poured herself a cup. He noticed she'd stopped hesitating before doing ordinary things in his kitchen, and he filed that away without comment. "She gets back today," Victoria said. It wasn't a question. 6 o'clock. My mother drops her. Victoria turned and leaned against the counter and looked at him steadily. "Are you nervous about that? About my 8-year-old daughter? About what she's going to think?" Noah looked at his mug. "Emma's perceptive. I'm not going to insult her by pretending there's nothing unusual about the situation. A friend needed a place, that's true enough. And if she asks more questions, then I'll answer what I can and tell her I don't know the rest yet." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "You do that a lot, don't you? Tell her when you don't know." "Seems better than making something up." "Most parents make something up. I did for a while, after the divorce." He set down his mug. "Julia and I kept telling her everything was fine. For about 4 months. Emma knew we were lying, and she stopped telling us when things were bothering her because she figured we'd just lie back. Took a year to undo that." Something crossed Victoria's face. "She stopped trusting you." "Temporarily. Kids are forgiving if you give them a reason to be." He picked up his mug again. "Had to earn it back. That's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've worked 19-hour shifts." Victoria wrapped both hands around her coffee and looked at the refrigerator at Emma's drawing at the ceramic frog, at the height marks on the doorframe. She was quiet for long enough that Noah thought she was done talking, and then she said in a lower voice, "My mother told me everything was fine too, when it wasn't." He waited. "My father traveled for work when I was young. She used to tell me he was coming home soon every time, even when soon meant months. I think she believed it would hurt me less to expect him than to accept he wasn't there." She paused. "By the time I was 12, I'd stopped expecting anything. It hurt less she was right about that. But it also—" She stopped. "It also what?" "It made me very good at not needing people," she said, "which served me extremely well for about 30 years. And then it didn't." Noah looked at her across his kitchen. The CEO of a technology company standing in her socks in his drafty kitchen on a Sunday morning, telling him something she probably hadn't told anyone in a very long time, maybe ever. "What did Marcus do?" he said. "The first time you knew something was wrong." She looked at him. "What do you mean? You said you'd known for a year. What was the first thing?" She was quiet. Set down the coffee. "He stopped asking me questions," she said finally. "We used to, when the company was new, we used to spend hours talking through problems together. He'd ask me things. What do you think? What would you do? Why did you make that call?" And slowly he stopped. And I told myself he was just busy. We were both busy. That's what happens in a long marriage. She paused. But the truth was, he'd already gotten everything he needed from those conversations. He'd already taken the information. There was nothing left to extract. The word landed in the kitchen like something dropped. Extract. Noah said, "He was mining you. For years." Her voice was flat and clean, the way voices got when people had already cried about something enough times that the crying part was done and only the fact remained. "I built something real, and he used me to get close enough to dismantle it." Noah didn't say he was sorry. He'd learned in the last 3 years that sorry was often just a word people used because silence felt inadequate. Sometimes silence was more honest. He said, "Are you going to let him—" Victoria looked at him sharply. "Dismantle it," he said. "Are you going to let him?" Her jaw set. "No." "Then stop sitting with what he did and start building what comes next." She stared at him. He half expected irritation. He was technically a maintenance supervisor, telling his CEO what to do in his own kitchen. But instead, something sharpened in her face, something that looked like the first real version of herself he'd seen since she showed up in his bedroom 2 nights ago. "You're direct," she said. "I fix things. Hard to fix something if you don't say what's broken." She picked up her coffee again, drank it, set it down. "I need access to a secondary server our legal team doesn't know about. Marcus moved the files because he knew our legal team would flag the main system. But he didn't think I'd look at the backup index. You have access to it. I have access to everything. I built the system." Something had shifted in her posture in the set of her shoulders. The tired woman from 2 hours ago was still there, but something else was layering over it. Focus, precision, the thing that had made her who she was before everything went sideways. "I need a secure connection. I don't want to use anything traced back to my personal accounts." Noah reached into the kitchen drawer and put a prepaid Wi-Fi hotspot on the counter between them. Still in the package. He'd bought it 3 months ago for a job site where the company network was unreliable. Victoria looked at it, then at him. "You just had that." "I fix things," he said. "I keep useful things around." She picked it up, then quietly. "Why are you helping me?" He thought about it. "Because you showed up, and because the situation you're in is wrong, and because—" He stopped, found the honest version, because nobody should have to fight something like this alone just because the people around them need them to look like they're winning. She held his gaze for a moment that went on just long enough to mean something. Then she took the hotspot and went to work. He left her to it. He went and fixed the stuck lock on the back door that had been annoying him for a month, and when he came back an hour later, she was at the kitchen table with 3 windows open on her laptop and the focused expression of someone who had found what they were looking for. She looked up. "I have it. All of it. Enough." She pressed her lips together. 8 months of transfers, timestamps, destination accounts. He set up a shell company 3 years ago, before we even separated. She looked at the screen. He was planning this when we were still sharing a bed. The last sentence came out different from the others. Quieter, more human. Noah sat down across from her. She looked up from the screen, and the mask slipped for just a second. Not all the way, not a collapse, just a crack, like something behind it pressing outward. "I loved him," she said. "Not at the end, but at the beginning. I want to be clear about that because I think sometimes people assume that women like me don't actually love people. We just make strategic alliances." She looked at the table. "I loved him. I built this company alongside him. I thought we were building something real. You were, Noah said. You just didn't know he was copying the blueprints. She let out a breath, half a laugh, bitter and short, but real. What happens when you file? He asked. The board will want to manage it. They'll want to frame it as an internal matter, protect the stock price. She closed the laptop part way. Marcus will go to the media the minute he sees legal papers. He has a story ready. He's been writing it for months. What's his story? That I was unstable, erratic, that the company's growth under my leadership was unsustainable, and he was the one managing the real risk. That the separation broke something in me. She said it with clinical detachment that took obvious effort. He's very good at narratives, always was. So are you, Noah said. She looked at him. You've been telling the company's story for 13 years, he said. Investors, clients, employees, press. You know how to frame something. He's got a head start, but you've got the truth. The truth doesn't always win. No, but it's the only thing that holds up over time. Everything else needs too much maintenance. She looked at him steadily. You think like a builder. I am a builder. Most builders build things up. You also seem to think about what holds. Same skill, he said. A thing that looks good and doesn't hold is just expensive rubble. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, I want to make a call to my general counsel, not the board's attorney's mine, a woman I've known for 15 years. She's the only one I trust completely. Make the call. If Marcus has people watching my phone. Use mine, Noah said. She looked at him. Noah, if it comes back on me, I'll deal with it. He slid his phone across the table. You said he wouldn't go after civilians. I'm trusting that assessment. She looked at the phone for a long moment, then she picked it up. She made the call from his kitchen table, while he sat at the other end pretending to read a 3-week-old issue of a home improvement magazine he had no memory of buying. He heard her say, Rachel, yes, I know, I'm safe. Listen to me. I need you to pull the Meridian Backup Index without alerting the legal team. I'll explain when I see you. I'm sending you something. Noah. Then a pause. Then quieter. No. A person I trust. The only one right now. He kept his eyes on the magazine. The only one right now. He didn't know what to do with that. He was 42 and divorced, and he fixed things for a living. And he was wearing a flannel shirt with a small coffee stain on the left sleeve. And he had been invisible in that building for 4 years. The woman on his phone in his kitchen had once been photographed for the cover of a national business magazine in a $7,000 dress. The only one right now. He turned the magazine page. She hung up and slid the phone back across the table. She'll have the documents pulled by midnight. Good. She asked who I was with. What did you tell her? That you were the maintenance supervisor at the building. A pause. She didn't say anything for a second. Then she said, good instincts. Noah looked up from the magazine. Smart woman. The smartest person I know. Victoria folded her hands on the table. She said something else. She said, and I quote, the fact that you ran toward a regular person instead of another power player means you're thinking more clearly than you have in years. He looked at her. She looked back. I think she might be right. The afternoon moved in a way. Afternoons rarely did. Not quickly, not slowly, but with a kind of density. Each hour full of small moments that didn't announce themselves as important, but accumulated into something. Victoria worked. Noah worked. They ate lunch soup from a can that he doctored enough to be worth eating. She said without condescension that it was good. And he believed her because she said it the way hungry people said things were good, meaning it. Around 3 o'clock, she came out of the guest room, where she'd retreated to make calls, and found him in the living room doing something with the underside of the couch, which had a leg that wobbled. You're fixing everything in your house, she said. Been putting it off. Why now? He glanced up. Something to do while I'm waiting. Waiting for what? For things to become clearer. He tightened the leg, gave it a test push. I think better when my hands are busy. She sat in the armchair across from him. Emma's armchair, technically the one Emma had claimed 2 years ago on the grounds that it had the best angle for reading, which was true. Victoria pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms around them, which was the most physically relaxed he'd seen her. Not CEO relaxed, where relaxed meant controlled and photogenic. Actually relaxed, like a person who had found temporarily a place where the performance could stop. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "You can ask." "The divorce, when it was final, what did you do?" He sat back on his heels. "I drove Emma to school. Then I came back, and I sat in the driveway for 40 minutes because I couldn't figure out what came next. Then I went inside and made a list of every single thing that needed to be fixed in the house. And that helped. List was 3 pages long, kept me busy for months." He set down the wrench, and somewhere in fixing all of it, I stopped needing to sit in the driveway. She was quiet. "Marcus is contesting the original ownership structure. He's claiming the foundational IP was developed jointly and that he deserves 50% of the company's current valuation." Noah kept his expression level. "Is that possible?" "Legally. His attorneys say yes. Mine say no." She looked at her hands. "The truth is, he contributed significantly in the first 18 months. After that, he moved into a strategic role that was largely ceremonial. He made that choice. I don't think he realized until recently how much the company was worth." "How much?" she told him. He absorbed the number quietly. It was the kind of number that existed outside normal human comprehension, the kind you read in articles and then immediately lost your grip on. "Okay," he said. "Okay. People have done worse things for less." He picked up the wrench again. "Doesn't make it right. Just makes it comprehensible." She studied him. "You're not intimidated by the number. Numbers don't fix things or break them. People do." He moved to look at the bookshelf that had been leaning at a slight angle for 2 years. "The number's just why he did it. It's not the problem. The problem is he used you. That part I understand just fine." She went still. He hadn't meant it as anything significant, just a statement of fact. But the way she went still told him it landed somewhere that hadn't been reached in a while. "Nobody's said it that plainly," she said. "Everyone talks about the company, the stock, the legal structure, the reputation. They talk about all the things around it." Her voice was steady, but something underneath it wasn't. "Nobody just says he used you." "He did," Noah said. "That's the thing that needs saying." She looked away. At the window. At the gray outside it. When she looked back, her eyes were clear and dry, but there was something in them that was working very hard to stay that way. "Thank you," she said. "For what? For saying the thing." He didn't know what to do with the gratitude, so he did what he always did, which was move on to what came next. "Bookshelf is going to fall over in the next 6 months if I don't do something about the anchor," he said. "I'm going to fix it. Right now. Might as well." She watched him work for a while without saying anything. Then Emma came home. He heard his mother's car in the driveway before Emma came through the door, because Emma always came through doors the way 8-year-olds did. Like the door was barely relevant, like it was just an obstacle between herself and wherever she was going. She burst in with her backpack on one shoulder, and her grandmother's voice behind her saying something about leaving boots by the door, and she was halfway into the living room before she stopped dead and saw Victoria. Emma looked at her. Victoria, who had been sitting in the armchair, went slightly still in a way that Noah recognized from the building the micro-adjustment people made when they weren't sure of their footing when the situation was outside their known parameters. Emma looked at her father. "Hi, Dad." "Hey, Bug. Good weekend. We made pierogi." She looked back at Victoria. "Hi." "Hi," Victoria said. Her voice came out different than it had all weekend. Not the CEO voice, and not the kitchen table voice, but something in between, careful and genuine. "I'm Emma." "I know, I've seen your drawings." Victoria gestured at the refrigerator. "The one of the house is my favorite. You got the proportions right." Emma blinked, tilted her head, looked at the drawing, then back at Victoria. Most grown-ups say they like the colors. The colors are good, but the proportions are harder. Most people can't do that without measuring. Emma stared at her for a long second. Then she turned to Noah. Is she staying here? For a little while. She needed somewhere to stay. Is that okay with you? Emma considered this with the serious deliberation she brought to most decisions, which he'd always loved about her. Does she like pierogi? Victoria said. I haven't had them in a long time. Grandma taught me. I can make them. Emma looked at her father. Can I make them for dinner? It's 6:30 bug. Pierogis aren't hard. Noah looked at Victoria. Victoria said, I'd love that. And something in her voice was so unguarded and so real that Emma heard it immediately. Kids always did, and nodded once with the settled confidence of someone whose question had been answered. Emma went to drop her backpack in her room. Noah's mother appeared in the doorway, looked at Victoria, looked at Noah, and raised an eyebrow that contained an entire sentence he was not willing to decode right now. Thanks, Mom. I'll call you tomorrow. His mother looked at him one more second, then smiled at Victoria. Nice to meet you, dear. And then she was gone, which meant she was going to call him the moment she got in the car, which meant his phone was going to ring in approximately 4 minutes. He looked at Victoria. That's my mother. I gathered. She's going to want an explanation. What will you tell her? He thought about it. The truth, more or less. Victoria almost smiled. Second door on the right, she said, which was what he'd said to her Friday night, and which landed between them as a kind of small private shorthand, the kind people developed without planning to, and the fact that they already had one after less than 48 hours was something he deliberately chose not to think about. Emma made the pierogis. Not alone. Victoria ended up at the kitchen counter beside her, following Emma's direction with the careful attentiveness of someone who had never been taught how to do this and was taking it very seriously. Emma was an unsparing teacher. She told Victoria twice that she was pinching the edges wrong. Victoria corrected herself without complaint. Noah stood to the side and watched his 8-year-old daughter teach a Fortune 500 CEO how to seal a dumpling, and felt something turn over in his chest that had no clean name. At the table, Emma said, My friend Jade's mom is a doctor. She's always busy. Doctors usually are, Victoria said. Are you always busy? Yes, more than I should be. Dad says being too busy is how you miss the important stuff. Emma loaded another pierogi onto her fork. He said he used to be too busy, before. Before what? Victoria asked and looked at Noah. Emma looked at him too. Before I figured out what I was being busy for, Noah said. Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. She ate her pierogi. Then to Victoria with the directness that never failed to catch him off guard. Are you sad? Victoria set down her fork. Why do you ask that? Because you look like you're trying not to be, Emma said. My dad used to look like that. After Mom left. The table went very quiet. Noah said, Emma. It's okay, Victoria said. She looked at Emma steadily. Yes, a little. Things have been hard recently. Emma nodded, processing this. Dad says sad is okay as long as you don't move in permanently. Victoria looked at Noah. He shrugged. I say a lot of things. That's a good one, Victoria said. To Emma. I'll try to remember that. Emma seemed satisfied. She picked up her fork again. The pierogis are good, she announced to no one in particular. I got the proportions right. Victoria made a sound that was more laugh than anything she'd produced all weekend. Genuine, surprised, unguarded. It broke across the table and Noah caught it and held it somewhere he couldn't have pointed to on a map of himself. After dinner, after Emma had been wrangled toward bed, after the teeth-brushing argument and the book negotiation, and the final glass of water that was definitely not necessary, but always requested. Noah came back to the kitchen to find Victoria washing the dishes again. He stood in the doorway. She'd done them already, all 3 plates, and the pot, and the colander Emma had used. She was drying her hands on the dish towel. She turned and saw him, and said before he could speak, She asked me when you went to get her water. Emma. What did she ask? Victoria folded the dish towel and set it on the counter. She said, "Are you going to leave like everyone else?" The silence in the kitchen was absolute. What did you say? He asked. Victoria looked at him. Her face was open in a way it hadn't been on Friday, hadn't fully been on Saturday, was still becoming on Sunday evening. I told her I didn't know, she said, because I didn't want to make her a promise I couldn't keep. He stood there. Was that the wrong answer? She asked. No, he said. That was exactly the right answer. She looked down at the folded dish towel. Then she said quietly, almost to herself, "She asked me to stay. Nobody has ever just asked me to stay." Noah crossed the kitchen and took the dish towel and hung it back on the oven handle and didn't say anything for a moment. Because some things didn't need a response, they needed a witness. And sometimes being present was the whole of what you could offer, and it turned out that was enough. Then his phone buzzed on the counter. He looked at it. The name on the screen was Marcus Hayes. Not a call. A text. He turned the screen so Victoria could see it. She went very still. The text said, "I know where you are. We should talk before this gets worse for everyone." Victoria stared at the screen, looked up at Noah. Her face had changed, not collapsed, not cracked, but hardened, clarified the way metal hardened when it had been through fire enough times. "He found you," Noah said. "He found me." Her voice was even. "It won't be worse. For everyone. It'll be worse for him." Noah looked at her. She looked at the phone, then at him. "Are you still in knowing he knows?" He thought about Emma upstairs, probably not yet asleep, probably reading under the covers with a flashlight she didn't know he knew about. He thought about what he'd said about protecting his family. He thought about the kind of man he wanted to be when things got hard, which was the only time it mattered what kind of man you were. "Yeah," he said, "I'm still in." Something moved through her expression, relief, gratitude, something fiercer than both of those. "Good," she said. She picked up her own phone. "Because I need to call Rachel, and then we need to talk about what happens tomorrow." The text sat on the counter between them like a lit fuse. Noah didn't touch the phone. Victoria didn't look away from it. And for about 10 seconds neither of them said a word, which was the kind of silence that had weight to it. The kind that meant something was ending, and something else was beginning. And the space between those two things was exactly 10 seconds long. Then Victoria picked up her own phone and called Rachel. She didn't put it on speaker. She walked to the guest room and closed the door, and Noah stood in his kitchen and looked at Marcus Hayes' text and thought about what kind of man sent a message like that. Not a threat exactly, not an apology. A negotiation opener disguised as concern. "We should talk before this gets worse for everyone." Everyone. As if Marcus Hayes had ever in his life made a decision that accounted for everyone. Noah put the phone face down on the counter. He went upstairs. Emma's light was off, but there was the thin yellow line under her door that meant the flashlight, which meant she was reading, which meant she was not asleep, which meant he had approximately zero chance of having a difficult conversation in private for at least another 40 minutes. He knocked twice, soft. "I'm asleep," Emma said. "Your light is on." A pause. "I'm asleep with my eyes open." "That's not a thing?" "It could be a thing." He pushed the door open. She was flat on her back with a book across her face, which was not how people read books, but was apparently how Emma read them when she was pretending not to. He sat on the edge of her bed. She pulled the book down and looked at him. "Is the lady okay?" she asked. "Victoria. And yes, she's making a phone call. She seemed sad at dinner. She's going through something hard." Emma turned this over. "Like how you were hard for a while after Mom. Something like that. Different reasons. But the same feeling." He looked at his daughter. 8 years old. Sometimes he forgot looking at her that she was 8. Sometimes she looked right through things in a way that took him years to learn. "Yeah," he said. "The same feeling." Emma pulled her book back up. I told her she could borrow Mr. Carrots if she wanted. Mr. Carrots was a stuffed rabbit of significant importance. The fact that Emma had made that offer was not a small thing. What did she say? She said thank you and looked like she was going to cry. Emma paused. I didn't say anything about it. I figured that was better. It was, Noah said. That was exactly right. He kissed her forehead and told her 15 more minutes and went back downstairs, and when he reached the kitchen, Victoria was already there, standing with her back against the counter and her arms crossed, and the expression of someone who had just heard something that confirmed what they already knew. Rachel pulled it, she said, all of it. The transfer logs, the shell company formation documents, the destination accounts. 8 months of outbound data, time-stamped traceable, and every single one of them initiated from Marcus's personal access credentials. That's enough. More than enough. She exhaled. She's filing a preliminary injunction in the morning. Freeze his assets, restrict his access to anything connected to Hayes Global, and a pause. She wants to move fast, before he has time to get the story to anyone who'll run it. Can she move that fast? Rachel moves like she's always already late, Victoria said, and something almost like affection moved through her voice. She'll have it filed by 8 a.m. Noah nodded. What does he do when the papers hit? She looked at the counter. He goes loud. That's always been his move. When cornered, Marcus goes loud. He's good at it. He knows how to control a room, how to control a narrative. She looked up. He'll go to the press by noon. With what? Everything he's been building. The story about instability, about the company's real risks, about... She stopped. About the breakdown. What breakdown? The kitchen got very quiet. She looked at the window, not at him. 3 years ago, during the peak of a really bad quarter, I had 6 weeks where I wasn't... She stopped again, rearranged. I wasn't well. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I had panic attacks twice in 1 week, and the second one was bad enough that my assistant called Marcus at a board dinner and he came home. She paused. I went to a doctor, got help, came back. The company didn't miss a beat. Nobody knew outside of maybe 3 people. Marcus was one of them, Noah said. Marcus was one of them. She turned back to face him. He's going to say it's a pattern, that I'm not stable, that the company needs new leadership. He has emails. He has the doctor's name. He may even have the diagnosis. I don't know how far he went. Her voice stayed steady, but her hands, which she'd put flat on the counter, pressed down hard enough that her knuckles went pale. He's going to take the most frightened I've ever been and use it as a weapon. Noah stood across the kitchen from her and looked at her face, the jaw set, the eyes clear and hard, the hands flat and pressing, and he thought she has been carrying this for 3 years. Not the secret, the shame of it, the fear that it would be found and weaponized. And it had been, and she'd seen it coming, and she'd held it anyway alone, because there was nobody to hold it with her. Does it change anything? He asked. She blinked. What? The breakdown, 3 years ago. Does it change what you built, what you ran, what the company is? She looked at him. No. Does it make what he did less criminal? No. Then it's not a weapon, he said. It's just a thing that happened. He can say it out loud all he wants. It doesn't become a weapon unless you treat it like one. She stared at him. He's counting on you being afraid of it, Noah said. The second you stop being afraid of it, he's got nothing. The silence stretched for a moment. Then she said slowly, like she was testing the weight of something. My PR team is going to tell me to deny it, minimize it, get ahead of the narrative. Or you say it yourself first, Noah said. Your words, your terms. Take it away from him before he can use it. She didn't say anything. He wasn't a strategist. He wasn't a PR consultant or a corporate attorney or anything close to any of the people who were paid to advise her. He was a man who fixed broken things, and the broken thing here was the architecture of someone else's power over her, and the solution to that was almost always the same. Take the thing they're holding over you and hold it yourself. That's not, she started. I know, he said. I know it's not how it's done. No? She looked at the counter. I mean, it's not... A pause. Nobody has ever suggested that to me. Everyone in my world would rather build a better wall than admit there's a crack. He shrugged. Walls that look perfect from the outside collapse different than walls that people know are cracked. One surprises you. The other one you've already planned for. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone, looked at it, and said, I need to think. Take the time. I don't have time. Rachel files at 8. Then think fast. She almost laughed. It didn't quite make it all the way out, but it tried. She went back to the guest room. He locked the front door, checked the back, turned off the kitchen light. He sat on the couch for a while in the dark with his hands on his knees and thought about the text on his phone and about Marcus Hayes, who was somewhere in Seattle right now, probably in a hotel, probably with a very good attorney, probably very certain that he was the one holding the cards. Noah thought he doesn't know what she has. Noah thought he also doesn't know she's not alone. He went to bed at midnight. He didn't sleep. At 2:14 in the morning, there was a knock at his bedroom door. 3 knocks, soft. He was already sitting up. Yeah. The door opened. Victoria stood in the frame. She'd changed into something more comfortable, plain gray sleep clothes, and she had her laptop under her arm and the look of someone who had been writing for 2 hours. I wrote it, she said. Wrote what? The statement, my version, before he can give his. She came in and sat on the edge of the chair by his desk, the chair he threw jackets on the chair nobody actually sat in, and turned the laptop toward him. I want you to read it. He reached over and turned on the bedside lamp. Read. It was short, shorter than he expected. 12 sentences. She'd written about the company, about the betrayal, about the legal action being filed in the morning. And then near the end, 2 sentences that he read twice. 3 years ago, I experienced a period of serious burnout and sought mental health support. It made me a better leader, and I am not ashamed of it. He looked up. Too much? She asked. No, he said. It's exactly right. You're sure? I'm sure. She took the laptop back, looked at the screen. I'm terrified, she said. Not dramatically, just factually the way someone named an accurate condition. I know. Not of him. Of... She stopped. Of being seen. Actually seen. Not the profile, not the cover story. Just... She looked at the laptop. Me. You've been seen all weekend, Noah said. It didn't kill you. She looked at him. You've been sitting in my kitchen and eating scrambled eggs and letting my 8-year-old tell you you're pinching the pierogies wrong, he said. You've been seen. It's already happening. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you make it sound simple. I'm not saying it's simple. I'm saying you've already been doing it. He met her eyes. The hard part isn't the statement. The hard part was Friday night. You already did that. Something shifted in her face. Something tightly held, carefully maintained, began to come loose, just slightly. Not a collapse, never a collapse with this woman, but a loosening. Like a knot that had been pulled tight for so long, it had almost become permanent, beginning to give. Send it to Rachel, he said. Let her look at it. It's her job to know if it works. She nodded, stood, moved to the door, then stopped. Noah. Yeah. When this is done, when all of it is done, I don't know what happens. She said it to the door, not to him. I don't know what this is. You and me in your kitchen eating soup, and I don't have a category for it. He sat in the low light and looked at her profile. You don't need one right now, he said. Right now, there's just what's next. She turned and looked at him. What's next? Rachel files at 8. You get some sleep between now and then, and tomorrow we deal with what comes. She looked at him for a beat longer than necessary. Then, okay. Good night, Victoria. Good night. A pause. Thank you, again. You don't have to keep thanking me. I know. She moved out of the doorway. I just keep wanting to. The door closed. He lay in the dark for a while, thought about what she'd said. I don't have a category for it. He understood that. He didn't have one either. What he had was this: a woman who showed up broken and had spent 2 days becoming less so, and a man who spent 3 years being invisible and was starting to feel like someone had turned a light on in a room that had been closed for a long time. He didn't know what that meant yet. "What's next?" she'd asked. He closed his eyes. What's next? At 7:45 in the morning, while Emma ate cereal and told Victoria a very detailed story about a disagreement she'd had with a girl named Sophie over who discovered America first, Noah's phone rang. Unknown number. He stepped into the hallway. "Mr. Carter?" The voice was smooth, professional, calibrated to sound reasonable. "My name is Daniel Rice. I'm calling on behalf of Marcus Hayes. I believe you have something that belongs to him." Noah said nothing for a moment. "I don't think that's accurate." "Mr. Hayes' wife." "Ex-wife," Noah said. A pause. "His ex-wife is on your property. There are legal implications to that, Mr. Carter, particularly given the ongoing proceedings regarding Hayes Global. I want to make sure you understand your position here." "What position is that?" "The position of an employee who has become entangled in a corporate dispute above his pay grade." The smoothness didn't slip. "We're not interested in causing problems for you. Mr. Hayes simply wants a conversation with his ex-wife, and he's concerned that she may be being influenced." The word sat in the air like something dropped on purpose. "I'm going to stop you there," Noah said. "I don't have anything that belongs to Marcus Hayes. I have a friend who needed a place to stay. That's the entire story." He kept his voice level. "And if Marcus Hayes has something to say to Victoria, he can say it through his attorneys, like adults." Another pause, longer this time. "I understand. I just want to make sure you're aware that things could become complicated for you professionally." "Is that a threat?" "It's an observation." "Then observe this," Noah said. "I've been doing my job at Hayes Global for 4 years. My record is clean, my work is clean, and the company I work for is going to look very different by this afternoon than it does right now. So if you're making observations about professional complications, I'd make sure the person you're calling on behalf of has clean hands before you start the conversation." He paused. "We done? A beat. For now." "Good." He hung up. He stood in the hallway for 3 seconds. Then he walked back to the kitchen. Victoria was looking at him. Emma had gone quiet mid-cereal. "Who was that?" Victoria asked. "Someone named Rice. Marcus's man." She went still. "He called you directly." "He has my number. Through the building system, probably." He pulled out his chair and sat down. "He suggested I was being entangled in something above my pay grade." Emma said, "What's your pay grade?" "Emma," he said. "What? It's a real question." Victoria made a sound that was a laugh, a real one surprised out of her, and Emma looked pleased with herself in the specific way of children who know they've done something right without knowing exactly what it was. "He tried to warn you off," Victoria said. Her voice had gone tight. "He tried. Noah, I meant what I said Sunday." He told her, "I'm in. He'll come at you professionally. I need you to understand that. He'll look for—" "There's nothing to find." He met her eyes. "I've never taken a shortcut. I've never cut a corner. I've never done anything I'd be ashamed to see in writing." He paused. "Have you?" She looked at him. "No." "Then we're fine." She looked at the table, then at him. Then she said quietly, so Emma couldn't quite hear, "He knows which house. He knows your name. If he starts—" "Victoria." He kept his voice even. "I told you Friday. I won't let anyone hurt my family. That's still true today. What it also means is that I'm not going to sit down because someone told me to sit down." Emma had gone back to her cereal, but she was listening. He could tell by the way she was very deliberately not looking at either of them, which was Emma's version of listening without being caught doing it. Victoria closed her eyes for 1 second, opened them. Rachel filed at 8:07. "That's fast. That's Rachel." She looked at her phone. "Marcus will know by 9." It was 8:52. They had 7 minutes. The 7 minutes passed, the way the last minutes before something changed. Always passed too quickly and too slowly, at once the clock moving and the air not. Emma finished her cereal, took her bowl to the sink, and went upstairs to get ready for school with the efficiency she reserved for mornings when she sensed the adults needed the room. At 9:04, Victoria's phone lit up. She looked at the screen. Her face didn't change. "He's calling." "Don't answer." "I know." She declined it. Watched the phone. It rang again immediately. She declined it again. Then a text came through, and she read it without turning the phone toward him, and whatever it said made her jaw tighten in a way he hadn't seen yet. Not fear, not uncertainty, but something that looked like anger finally allowed to be itself. She set the phone down, looked at him. "He says if I proceed, he'll have the story to 3 outlets by noon, and he'll include everything. The burnout, the doctor, all of it." Noah said, "Send the statement." She blinked. "Right now. Right now. Before he gets to noon." She picked up her laptop. Her hands weren't shaking. He noted that. 3 years of fear about this moment, and her hands weren't shaking. She opened it, found the email to Rachel with the statement attached, typed 2 words, "Send this," and hit send. She closed the laptop. She looked at Noah. "It's done," she said. He nodded. She put both hands flat on the table. "I've been afraid of this for 3 years," she said. 3 years of carrying it, of knowing he had it, of making every decision with this background noise that said if you push too hard he'll use it. She looked at her hands. "And now it's out there, and I sent it myself." "How does it feel?" She thought about it. "Like I jumped off something," she said. "I don't know if there's water or rocks at the bottom." "There's water," he said. "You don't know that?" "No," he said. "But you don't drown from one jump. You drown from not jumping and running out of room to stand." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, with something that was very nearly a full smile, "That is the most maintenance supervisor thing anyone has ever said to me. I'm going to take that as a compliment." It was. Emma came back downstairs with her backpack, her jacket half on one shoe untied. She stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at the two of them at the table, and with the direct simplicity that was her most consistent quality said, "You both look like something happened." "Something did," Noah said. "Good things." Emma looked at Victoria. "You okay?" Victoria looked at Emma, and something moved across her face that was unguarded and immediate and real. "Yeah," she said. "I think I'm starting to be." Emma nodded like this was sufficient. "Can you tie this?" She thrust her untied shoe toward Noah. He tied it. He drove Emma to school. Victoria stayed at the house. The drive was 12 minutes each way. And in those 12 minutes, 3 things happened. His phone buzzed twice with news alerts that had Victoria's name in the headline. His mother called, and he sent it to voicemail for the 2nd time in 2 days. And he thought, with the particular clarity of a moving car, and no one watching about the fact that he was now actively involved in something that was significantly larger than his normal life. He wasn't scared. He noted that. He waited for the fear to arrive. The reasonable, sensible fear of a man who could lose his job and his stability, and his daughter's stability, and it didn't come. What came instead was something quieter and more settled. The feeling of being in the right place doing the right thing, which he'd had on that night 4 years ago, in the server room with Ramirez and the portable cooling units, which he'd had when Emma cried in the hallway, and he sat outside her door, which he'd had in various forms throughout his life, whenever he stopped asking whether things were worth the effort and just did the thing that needed doing. He pulled back into the driveway at 9:38. Victoria was on the phone in the kitchen, standing moving slightly back and forth the way people moved when they were managing something active. She held up one finger when he came in. He got coffee. He sat. He waited. She hung up at 9:46. "Rachel says 2 of his 3 outlets already called for our response." "That's fast." "That's the statement. They have the story. They'd rather include our version than run his alone." She sat down. One of them, a reporter at the Times, said she'd been sitting on a tip about Marcus for 2 months, waiting for corroboration. She has it now. Noah wrapped his hands around his mug. He's not going to like that. No. She looked at her phone. He called 4 more times while you were out. I didn't answer. Good. He texted. He said... She paused, looked at the phone, then back at him. He said he knows I'm at an employee's house and that he's going to use it. Imply I'm unstable. Imply there's something... She chose the word carefully, inappropriate in the relationship. The kitchen went quiet. Noah looked at her. What do you want to do about that? She held his gaze. I want to ignore it because it's not true, and innuendo without evidence doesn't survive contact with the actual story. She paused. And I want to note that the thing about it that makes me angriest is not what it implies about me. It's what it implies about you. He said nothing. You've done nothing but help me, she said. You opened your house. You made me breakfast. You sat in your kitchen at 2 in the morning and read a 12-sentence statement and told me what was right about it. She looked at the table. He wants to turn that into something suspect because it's the only angle he has. Let him try, Noah said. People aren't stupid. Some are. Some are, he agreed. The ones who aren't will see a maintenance supervisor who helped someone in a bad situation and didn't ask for anything in return. That's not a scandal. That's a decent person. She looked at him steadily. You're not worried. I'm worried about Emma, he said honestly. I'm worried about whether this gets loud enough to affect her school or her routine. That's what I'm worried about. He set down the mug. I'm not worried about what Marcus Hayes thinks about me. Something in her expression went quiet. Still. The way something went still when it recognized something it hadn't expected to find. Can I tell you something? She said. Go ahead. The Housing Assistance Program, she said. The one the company runs for employees. The emergency fund, the below-market leases on company-owned properties. She looked at her hands. I set it up 4 years ago, after the Meridian flood, after you stayed 19 hours and turned down the bonus. She paused. You weren't the only person I was thinking of, but you were the reason I started thinking. He stared at her. I didn't connect this unit to you specifically, she said. The program is managed separately by a third party. I don't see the names, but when I was looking for somewhere to go on Friday and I accessed the building list, I saw your name on the lease and I thought... She stopped. He waited. I thought that's a person who does the right thing and doesn't tell anyone about it. She met his eyes. I think I needed to be around that for a few days. He sat with that for a moment. The fact that she'd built the program, that he'd used it and never known. That she'd known it was out there helping people like him and never taken credit for it, never mentioned it, never used it as a talking point in a company meeting. Just done it and moved on. He said, You never told anyone. It's a program. It runs. It helps people. It doesn't need a name on it. He looked at her. You built something good. I build things, she said. It's what I do. He recognized those words. He'd said something close to them yesterday. She'd borrowed them back and he heard that and he thought, this is what it looks like when two people start to speak the same language without trying. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. The name read, Hayes Global Board Chair. He showed it to Victoria. Her face changed. Not fear. Something more complicated. Gerald, she said. He's been on the board since the beginning. He and Marcus play golf every other Sunday. She looked at the phone. He's calling you. He probably wants to know if you're here. What are you going to say? He picked up the phone, answered. Mr. Carter. The voice was older than Rice's, more careful. I apologize for calling you directly. I want you to know I'm not calling on Marcus's behalf. Okay, Noah said carefully. I'm calling because I've spent 40 minutes this morning reading everything Victoria filed and everything that's coming out in the press. And I want you to know that what she's built is worth protecting. A pause. Is she there? Noah looked at Victoria. She was watching his face. He handed her the phone. She took it, held it to her ear, said Gerald. Noah couldn't hear the other side, but he watched her face as she listened, watched it shift from careful to something that wasn't guarded at all. Something that looked like relief, without quite being sure it was allowed to be. Her hand on the table pressed flat, and then her fingers slowly relaxed. She said, "Thank you." Then, "Yes." Then quietly, "I know, I should have." She stopped, listened, swallowed. "Okay, yes, I'll call you at noon." She handed the phone back. Noah waited. "He's calling an emergency board meeting," she said. "Without Marcus. Marcus's access to the board has been suspended pending the investigation." She looked at the table. "Gerald said he said the board is behind me, 7-1. She paused. "He said Marcus overplayed his hand, and they all saw it." "Good." "He also said—" She stopped. "What?" She looked up. Her eyes were dry, but something behind them was working. "He said he was glad I wasn't alone." She paused. "He said it matters in situations like this that a person has someone they trust beside them." She looked at Noah. "He asked me who was with me." "What did you say?" She looked at him for a moment, long enough to mean something. Then she said, "I told him a friend, someone who fixes things." The kitchen was quiet. Then his phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. The headline read, "Hayes Global CEO Victoria. Hayes files, fraud, claim against ex-husband and former COO issues. Personal statement." Below it, the first two lines of her statement. Her words, her terms. The two sentences near the end that he'd read twice at 2 a.m. by lamplight. He turned it toward her. She read it. Her face didn't collapse, didn't crack. It did something he hadn't seen it do yet in 4 days it opened, just slightly, just enough, like a door that had been stuck for a very long time, and finally with the right amount of pressure applied at the right angle moved. "It's out there," she said. "It's out there," he said. She nodded. Once. Pressed her lips together. Then she looked at him across his kitchen table in his house that was too small and had a guest room with a rattling radiator and a bookshelf he'd anchored to the wall and a refrigerator covered in drawings, and she said, "What do you do now when you've fixed the thing?" He thought about it honestly. "I usually find the next thing that's broken." She held his gaze. "And if nothing's broken?" He looked at her. The woman who showed up at 11:47 on a rainy Friday with a designer suitcase and 4 days of no sleep and the whole architecture of her life coming apart. The woman who taught herself to pinch pierogies wrong and then right. The woman who offered Mr. Carrots to a stranger. The woman who sent 12 sentences into the world and didn't flinch. "Then you sit down for a minute," he said. "And you let yourself notice what's still standing." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "I think I'd like to do that." And for the first time in 4 days, neither of them said anything else, and it wasn't because there was nothing to say. It was because for the first time in a very long time, the silence between them didn't ask anything from either of them at all. The quiet didn't last long. It never did. At 11:17 that same morning, while Victoria was on a call with Rachel and Noah, was in the backyard doing the kind of physical work that helped him think replacing 2 boards on the back steps that had been soft for a month. His phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. And this time, when he answered it, the voice on the other end wasn't smooth like rice and wasn't careful like Gerald. It was sharp, cornered, and it was Marcus Hayes himself. "I want to be very clear with you," Marcus said without introducing himself, without any preamble at all. "I don't know what she's told you, but you are a maintenance worker at my company, and what you are doing right now has consequences that you are not equipped to understand." Noah was holding a hammer. He set it down on the step beside him and sat down on the one above it. "It's not your company," he said. "That's the whole point, isn't it?" A pause. Short, the kind that meant the person hadn't expected that particular response. "You're smarter than you look on paper," Marcus said. "That's going to make this harder for you, not easier." "Why's that?" "Because stupid people do stupid things and then act surprised. Smart people who do stupid things have no excuse." Marcus's voice had the texture of someone who was used to winning arguments by making the other person feel small. Calibrated. Practiced. "You have a daughter, 8 years old. You have a job, a lease on a company property, a pension that vests in 2 years. You have things to lose." Noah said nothing. "Victoria is not who you think she is," Marcus said. "She is very good at making people feel like they're the only one who understands her. It's a skill. I was the only one for 11 years. Before me, there were others." A pause. "She will take everything useful from you and move on. And you will be the maintenance worker who lost his job and his pension and his housing because he got involved in something that wasn't his business." Noah looked at the soft boards he'd pulled up. Dry rot underneath. The kind that looked fine from the surface until you put weight on it. "Are you done?" he said. "Excuse me? Are you done talking? Because I want to make sure you've finished before I respond." Another pause. Longer. "Go ahead." "You called me to make me afraid," Noah said. "That's the only reason for this call. You're not warning me. You're not protecting anyone. You're scared that you've lost control of the situation, and you're looking for a new lever." He kept his voice even. "I'm not a lever, and I'm not afraid of you. And the things you just listed, my daughter, my job, my pension, those are the reasons I'm going to stay exactly where I am. Because the kind of man I want her to see me be is the one who doesn't sit down when someone like you tells him to." Silence. "Don't call this number again," Noah said, and hung up. He sat on the back steps for about 30 seconds, just breathing. Then he picked up the hammer and went back to work. Victoria appeared at the back door at 11:44. She had her phone in her hand and an expression he'd learned to read over 4 days, the one that meant something had happened, and she was deciding how to present it. "He called you," she said. "He did." "What did he say?" "The usual. Threats wrapped in advice." Noah drove a nail. "I told him not to call again." She was quiet for a moment. "He also called Gerald. During the board prep call, Gerald had him removed from the line." She paused. "He's running out of moves. Cornered people are the most dangerous kind." "I know." She came out and sat on the top step, which was the one he hadn't gotten to yet, but was still solid. She was in the same sweater from this morning, sleeves pushed up, and she looked less like someone in the middle of a crisis, and more like someone who had made a decision about the crisis and was now simply executing it. "Rachel says the injunction is holding. His accounts are frozen. His attorneys are asking for a settlement meeting." "Settlement," Noah said. "He wants to negotiate. He wants to minimize." She looked at her hands. "Rachel says take the meeting. Get the best terms while he's scared." "What do you want?" She thought about it. "I want him to admit what he did, in writing, as part of the settlement." She paused. "I know that's not standard. I know it makes the negotiation harder. But I spent 11 years building something with someone who was quietly dismantling it while I slept. I want it on record that that happened, not for me." She looked at the fence at the edge of the yard. For every person at Hayes Global who came in every day and did their job and didn't know that the man with his name on the door was selling their work to competitors. Her voice was steady. They deserve to know it was real. That the thing they built was real. And that he's the one who wasn't. Noah stopped hammering. He looked at her. She turned and met his eyes. "Too much?" she asked. "No," he said. "Not too much." She exhaled. "Rachel said it's a long shot." "Worth taking," he said. "Long shots are just regular shots from further away, same mechanics." She looked at him for a second. "Do you know how strange you are? You and my mother," he said, and went back to the nail. She almost laughed. Then, "She's going to want an explanation. Your mother. You've sent her to voicemail twice." "3 times. Noah." "I'll call her tonight." He tested the board. Solid. She knows I'm okay. She just wants the story. What are you going to tell her? He sat back, thought about it honestly. The truth, more or less. He looked at Victoria. That someone I know needed a place to land. That things got complicated. That I made a judgment call. And if she asks about me specifically, then I'll tell her you're someone worth knowing. He said it simply, without decoration, the way he said things that were just true. He didn't look at her when he said it, kept his eyes on the steps, but he felt the small shift in the air that meant it had landed. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then quietly, that might be the nicest thing anyone has said about me in a very long time. He picked up the next board. Low bar. The highest people in my world can manage, apparently. She looked at the yard. My board members call me effective. My attorneys call me precise. My investors call me visionary. A pause. Nobody calls me worth knowing. They should. She was quiet. Maybe I haven't given them reason to. She looked at her hands. Maybe I built the walls so high that the view from inside got confused for who I actually was. Noah fit the board into place, held it. You gave Emma reason. First night. Emma's 8. 8-year-olds are the most accurate judges of character I've ever encountered, he said. They don't have the filter yet. They just see what's there. He drove the nail. She offered you Mr. Carrots. She doesn't do that for anyone. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, I don't know how to do this, she said. He looked up. Do what? She gestured vaguely at the yard, at the house, at him. This. The ordinary part. The back steps and the scrambled eggs and someone sitting in the hallway because the world is hard and you just want to not be alone in it. She looked at her hands. I built a company instead of a life. I told myself the company was the life. And now I'm sitting on someone's back porch watching them fix steps, and it feels more like living than anything I've done in a decade. He drove the last nail, sat back. It's not too late to figure it out. I'm 36. That's not old. In my world, it's old enough to know better. You do know better, he said. That's why you're here instead of still in that mansion letting him hold things over you. He stood up, tested the step. Good. Both of them. Solid. Knowing better is the first part. The rest is just showing up and doing the next thing. She looked up at him. You make it sound simple again. I don't think it's simple. He picked up the toolbox. I think most people make it complicated by confusing knowing what to do with being ready to do it. Readiness is overrated. You just do it before you're ready, and the readiness shows up eventually. She stared at him. Where did you learn that? The divorce, he said. Nobody is ready to co-parent well. You just do it badly and get better because there's a kid watching. She absorbed this. Then she stood up from the step and said, I need to be on a call with Gerald and the board at noon. Will you? She stopped, reformulated. Are you going to be here? Where else would I be? Something in her face did the thing. It did the thing where the mask that wasn't quite back up yet slipped a little further. Okay, she said. Good. She went inside. He put the toolbox away and washed his hands in the kitchen sink, and made 2 sandwiches because it was nearly noon, and neither of them had eaten since early morning, and he left one on the counter by the guest room door without knocking. 30 seconds later, the door opened, and she took it and said simply, Thank you, and went back to the call. He ate his at the kitchen table and listened to the ordinary sounds of the house and thought about what she'd said. More like living than anything I've done in a decade. He understood that more than he wanted to admit. Not in the same way his years after the divorce had been full of life, Emma-shaped and loud and demanding, but the particular feeling of being present in his own existence, of not just moving through the days, but actually inhabiting them. He'd lost that somewhere in the middle of his marriage, and found it again slowly, the way you found things you'd been living without long enough that you stopped noticing they were gone. It came back in pieces. The morning Emma made him a card that said "World's Okayest Dad" in crayon, and he'd laughed for the first time in months. The weekend he'd renovated the guest room himself, just him and a YouTube tutorial, and it came out better than expected. Small things. The small things were the whole thing. He was thinking about this when his phone buzzed with a text from a number he recognized this time. It was Daniel Rice again. Not a call. A text. 4 words. Last chance. Reconsider now. Noah stared at it for 10 seconds. Then he took a screenshot, texted it to Victoria, and put his phone face down on the table. 30 seconds later, she came out of the guest room mid-call, looked at his phone screen, and without pausing her sentence to Gerald, walked to her laptop, typed something, and went back in. He didn't know what she'd done. He found out later that she'd forwarded it to Rachel, who forwarded it to her legal team, who added it to the evidence file as an additional instance of witness intimidation. The board call ended at 1:47. Victoria came out of the guest room with the expression of someone who has just run a very long race and is trying to figure out whether they've won yet or just stopped running. She stood in the kitchen doorway and said, 7-0. Gerald brought the vote forward early. Marcus's equity stake is being reviewed under the fraud clause in the original partnership agreement. Noah looked up from the magazine he wasn't reading. What does that mean? It means that if the fraud is proven in court, which it will be, the evidence is airtight, he loses his stake. Not just the settlement, the stake. She paused. 13 years of it. That's what he was trying to prevent. That's what he was always trying to prevent. She sat down across from him. He knew when we separated that the divorce settlement alone wasn't going to be enough. Not the way the company had grown. So he started building the exit strategy. Take enough proprietary information to competitors that he could position himself as a consultant, maybe even a partner in whatever they were building. Make himself valuable on the outside before he lost access to the inside. He was building a lifeboat, Noah said, while I was trying to save the marriage. She said it without visible emotion, which meant she'd processed it already, or was processing it in the part of herself she didn't show, which amounted to the same thing. You couldn't have seen it, he said. I should have. No, you couldn't have. He leaned forward. People who love people don't spend their time building the case against them. You were trying to fix something. You can't fix something and simultaneously investigate whether the other person deserves to be fixed for. He paused. That's not a failure of intelligence. That's a failure of his character, not yours. She looked at him. Stop carrying his failures, he said. You've got enough of your own. We all do. A beat. Then, what are yours? He hadn't expected that. What? Your failures. You said we all have them. What are yours? He sat with the question. It was a fair one. She'd put all of hers on the table more or less over 4 days. It was only honest. I was absent, he said. Not physically. I was there. I showed up. I fixed things. I provided. He looked at the table. But there's a difference between showing up and being present. Julia used to say I was the most reliably absent person she knew. Like I'd built a really convincing version of being there and substituted it for the real thing. He paused. I thought if everything was taken care of, house bills, logistics, that was love. Turns out it was just management. Victoria was quiet. Emma helped me understand the difference, he said. She doesn't need managed. She needs witnessed. Completely different skill set. He picked up his coffee. I'm better at it now than I was. Still not great, but better. You witnessed me, Victoria said. This week. That's what it felt like. He looked at her. Not managed, she said. Not advised. Not handled. Just witnessed. She held his gaze. I don't have words for what that's been worth. The kitchen was quiet in the good way again. Then Emma came home. She burst through this front door at 3:22, louder than any child her size had a right to be, and she was already talking before she'd cleared the entryway. Dad. Sophie said that Columbus didn't discover America, and I said I know the indigenous people were already there, And my teacher said we were both right in different ways, which I don't think is an actual answer. And also, there's a project due Friday about family." She stopped in the kitchen doorway, saw Victoria recalibrated. "Hi." "Hi," Victoria said. "Indigenous people were already there is correct." Emma pointed at her. "See? Your teacher is trying to navigate a complicated historical question in a room full of third graders," Noah said. "Give her some credit." Emma sat down at the table and dropped her backpack. "What's the project about family?" Victoria asked. Emma reached into her bag and produced a crumpled sheet of paper that she'd clearly sat on at some point. "We have to make something about our family. Could be a poster or a model or a story." She smoothed it out. "I was going to do a story." "What kind of story?" Victoria asked. Emma looked at her directly with the total absence of subtlety that was her defining characteristic. "About us, me and Dad, and how we're a family even though it's just us two." She paused. "Is that sad?" Sophie said. "It might sound sad." "Sophie is wrong," Victoria said immediately, without hesitation. "That's not sad. That's honest. And honest things are always better than stories that pretend." Emma looked at her, long enough to make it count. "You sound like my dad." "I'll take that," Victoria said, and looked across the table at Noah, and the thing that moved between them in that moment, quick and warm and completely unplanned, was the kind of thing that didn't need naming to be real. Emma started her homework. Victoria helped, which was not something he'd anticipated, but Emma had a math sheet that was apparently catastrophically unfair, and Victoria sat beside her and worked through it with the same focused patience she brought to everything. And Noah stood at the counter making after-school snacks and watched the two of them at his kitchen table and thought with the specificity of a man who'd spent 3 years learning that what mattered was often the thing right in front of you, this exact moment. This was the thing. At 5 o'clock, after Emma had gone to do the reading portion of her homework in her room, Victoria's phone rang. She looked at the screen. "Rachel?" she said. Answered it. Listened. Noah watched her face. He saw the moment it changed. Not dramatically, just a settling. Like something that had been held in suspension, finally finding the surface. She said, "Okay." Then, "Yes." Then, after a long pause, "Tell him he gets the acknowledgement or he gets the courtroom. His choice." She hung up. Noah waited. "His attorneys want a settlement conference," she said. "Thursday. Rachel says he'll take the acknowledgement clause." She paused. "He wants one thing in return." "What?" "He wants me to issue a statement saying the separation was mutual and amicable." Noah looked at her. "Is that a lie? It's incomplete. The separation was real. The reasons weren't what he wants people to think." She turned the phone over in her hands. "Rachel says take it. She says it doesn't cost me anything material and it gets me the admission." "What do you want?" She was quiet for a moment. "I want to stop letting what he wants drive what I do." She set the phone down. "So yes, I'll take it. Not because it's what he wants. Because it's the last thing I have to do that involves him, and after Thursday, he stops being any part of my story." Noah nodded. "Good. It's not perfect. Nothing worth doing is." She looked at him. "You really believe that?" "I've been doing imperfect things all my life," he said. "They turn out better than the perfect thing you wait for." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "After Thursday, after the settlement conference, I'm going to need to go back, to the house, to the office, to my—" She paused. "My actual life." She looked at him steadily. "I've been here 5 days." "I know. Emma's school is 12 minutes from here. Your job is 20. My office is 35 minutes across town." She said it like facts, just facts. "Those are different worlds." He held her gaze. "They are." "So what does that mean?" she asked. Not challenging, not pushing, Just asking the way she'd started asking things directly without performance, with actual uncertainty in it, which was the realest version of her he'd seen. He thought about it honestly. The honest answer was he didn't know. He knew that 5 days ago he hadn't known her eye color, and now he knew she took her coffee with 1 sugar, and she read faster than anyone he'd ever seen. And she cried without making a sound, and she taught herself to pinch pierogies on the 2nd try, and she witnessed his daughter with more attention than most adults managed. He knew things about her that were more important than the things most people who'd known her for years knew. He also knew she was his boss, technically, and that she was in the middle of the hardest professional moment of her career, and that he had a daughter with a family project due Friday who needed stability above all else. "I think," he said carefully, "that we both need to let the dust settle before we answer that." She nodded. "That's the right answer." "It's the honest one." "Same thing," she said, and looked at him with something that was wry and warm and knowing. "Not always," he said. "With you it is." She picked up her coffee. "I've noticed that about you." He didn't have anything to add to that, which was fine. Some things didn't need a response. That night, after Emma was in bed after the house had gone quiet, they sat in the living room together for the last time in what felt like the particular shape of this week, the strange, suspended week out of normal time. The week that would become its own category later when they looked back at it. Victoria said, "I'm going to call the board tomorrow about the parent support program, the housing assistance, the child care fund. I want to expand it." Noah looked at her. "You didn't know I built it," she said. "Nobody did, and that was fine. It didn't need credit. But I think it needs to be bigger, and I think it needs to be visible, because people should know their employer sees them." She paused. "Not because I'm feeling sentimental about a week in a craftsman house in the suburbs, because it's right and it's overdue." "I know a few people who could use it," he said. "I know you do." She looked at the refrigerator drawings visible through the kitchen doorway. "I want to fund single-parent support specifically. Flexible scheduling, emergency housing, childcare subsidies." She turned back to him. "I'd want input from people who actually need it, not people who think they know what people need." He was quiet for a moment. "You're asking me." "I'm telling you, I'm going to ask you, when the dust settles." She met his eyes. "If you're willing." He thought about it. About being the person who turned down the bonus 4 years ago because it was just part of the job. About all the mornings he'd packed Emma's lunch and driven her to school and gone to a building with someone else's name on it and done good work that kept other people's work intact, and never thought about whether any of it meant anything beyond the paycheck. Maybe it meant this. Maybe this was what it had been leading to, in the slow, unglamorous way that most things led to, things not a straight line, not a plan, just a series of choices that added up to being in a specific kitchen, at a specific moment when someone needed someone who did the right thing without asking for anything back. "Yeah," he said. "I'm willing." She nodded, settled back into the chair, Emma's chair. "She's going to miss you," Noah said. "When you go back." "I'll miss her." A pause. "I'll miss this." He didn't say he would, too. But he didn't say he wouldn't. She looked at him across the living room in the low light in the quiet house. "You said you're better at being present than you used to be." "Working on it." "You're better at it than anyone I've ever known," she said. "For whatever that's worth." He held her gaze. "It's worth something." "Good." She stood. "I'm going to sleep. Tomorrow is going to be loud." "It will be." She moved toward the hallway, stopped, didn't turn around. "Noah?" "Yeah." "When Emma asked me if I was going to leave like everyone else." She paused. "I told her I didn't know, because I didn't want to make a promise I couldn't keep." "I remember." She turned then, just enough to look back at him over her shoulder. "I think I'm starting to know," she said. He sat with that, the hallway, the guest room door, the click of the latch. He sat in the quiet living room for a long time after that in Emma's chair that nobody except Emma sat in, and looked at the framed drawings on the wall and the ceramic frog on the windowsill, and the fixed bookshelf, and the repaired couch leg. All the small things held together by small decisions made one at a time. Outside, Seattle was doing what Seattle did. Breathing heavy gray and steady, the city moving through its ordinary life, while inside this small house, something had shifted in a way that didn't have a name yet, but didn't need one. Not yet. Some things held before you could prove they would. That was enough. Thursday came, the way difficult days always came, ordinary on the surface, the alarm going off at the same time, Emma, needing her lunch, packed the coffee maker, doing its usual thing. Nothing announced that it was the day the settlement conference would happen, the day Marcus Hayes would sit across a table from Rachel and sign his name to an acknowledgement that would follow him for the rest of his professional life. The day just arrived the way days did, and asked everyone in it to show up anyway. Victoria was dressed by 7. Dark blazer, her hair up the full CEO presentation, reassembled with a precision that reminded Noah of watching someone put on armor not to hide. He understood now, but to walk into a room and be taken seriously by people who needed the visual cue before they could manage it. He'd seen her in sleep clothes and Sunday sweaters, and a dish towel thrown over her shoulder. He knew the difference between the armor and the person. That felt significant in a way he hadn't expected when the week started. Emma looked at her across the breakfast table and said, "You look like your picture in the lobby." Victoria looked at her. "Is that good or bad?" Emma considered it. "Good," she said, "but I like the other way better." Victoria looked at Noah. He handed her a travel mug of coffee and said, "She's not wrong." Victoria took the mug, and for a second she just stood there holding it. And Noah could see the thing happening behind her eyes, the calculation, the weight of the day ahead, the thing she was walking toward. He recognized the look. It was the same look he'd had the morning he went to the mediator's office to sign the divorce papers. The look of a person who knows that what's on the other side of the next few hours is going to be better, but that getting through those hours is still going to cost something. "Rachel will be there," he said. "I know." "The evidence is airtight. You said that yourself." "I know." "Then you're just going in to watch him sign what he already owes you." She held the travel mug with both hands, the way she'd held coffee cups all week, and looked at him. "Why does it still feel hard?" "Because it was real," he said. "It was 11 years. It was your life. Just because he wasted it doesn't mean it wasn't yours." He met her eyes. "Feeling hard doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're human." She stood there for one more second. Then she nodded once, the kind of nod that was actually a decision, and said, "I'll call you when it's done." "I'll be here," he said, "or at the building, but I'll have my phone." She looked at Emma. "Wish me luck." Emma pointed her cereal spoon at her. "You don't need luck. You have evidence." She went back to her cereal. "Dad taught me that." Noah looked at his daughter. Emma looked back at him with the particular expression she wore when she knew she'd said the right thing and was trying not to look smug about it, which was its own kind of smug. Victoria laughed. The real one, the surprised one, the one that had no performance in it. "Okay," she said. "Okay." She left at 7:42. Noah drove Emma to school and came back to a house that felt different with Victoria's presence in it, even when she wasn't there. Her coffee mug still on the counter. Her laptop closed on the kitchen table. The guest room door open bed made with the particular neatness of someone who made their bed, because they'd made their own bed since childhood, and the habit was bone deep, not because anyone expected it. He went to work. He had a full day at the building. 3 maintenance requests that had backed up over the week, an HVAC filter replacement on the 4th floor, a door hinge on 6 that had been grinding for 2 weeks. Normal work. The work that filled 4 years of mornings. He did it the way he always did, with the focus that came from doing things correctly the first time, and around him, the building moved through its day. Hundreds of people in hundreds of offices, doing the work that kept Hayes Global running. Most of them unaware of what had happened this week. some of them aware and watching the news with the particular anxiety of people whose paychecks depended on the stability of the company their checks came from. At 9:53, Gerald Whitman appeared in the hallway outside the fourth-floor utility room where Noah was replacing filters. This was not something that had ever happened before in 4 years. Gerald Whitman was 71 years old and had been on the board since the company was 40 people in a rented office, and he moved through the building like someone who was aware of its history at every step. He stopped in the doorway. "Noah Carter." Noah looked at him. "Mr. Whitman, I wanted to find you." Gerald came in, which was notable, because the fourth-floor utility room was not a place anyone came to unless something was broken. He was a tall man, silver-haired with the particular kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. "I've been meaning to since Monday." "I appreciate you calling her," Noah said. "Sunday morning. It mattered. It's She needed to hear that the board wasn't going to abandon her. Gerald looked around the utility room with the expression of a man who had never been in one before and was finding it educational. "She's good, you know. She's been good for a long time. We should have been paying closer attention to what was happening around her." "You're paying attention now." "We are." He looked at Noah directly. "She told me you kept her steady this week, when she needed steadying." Noah replaced the last filter. "She steadied herself. I just didn't give her a reason to fall." Gerald was quiet for a moment. "That's a precise distinction." "It's an important one." "Yes." Gerald turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, Mr. Carter, whatever comes next, and I suspect something, you should know that the people who built this company from the ground up are the people who do work that matters and don't ask for recognition." He paused. "Victoria has always known who those people are, even when the circumstances made it hard to say so." He left. Noah stood in the utility room and let that settle. His phone buzzed at 11:27. "Victoria." He answered it. "It's done," she said. He leaned against the wall. "All of it. Signed, dated, the acknowledgement clause is in." His attorneys tried to soften the language at the last minute, and Rachel walked out of the room and came back in 8 minutes later, and it was in the document exactly as written. A pause. He could hear something in her voice, not relief exactly, more like the absence of a weight that had been there so long she'd stopped noticing it until it was gone. "He didn't look at me, the whole time. He signed everything, and he didn't look at me once. Does that bother you?" A long pause. "No," she said, and he could hear her realizing it as she said it. "It doesn't. It would have 3 months ago. It would have bothered me enormously. But right now I just—" She stopped. "I just feel tired and clean, like when you've had a fever for a long time and it finally breaks. That's what it's supposed to feel like." "Is it? Ending something real?" he said. "Yeah, that's exactly what it's supposed to feel like." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to the office. Gerald called a company-wide meeting for 1 o'clock. He wants me to address the employees directly, all 840 of them on the live feed. Are you ready for that?" "I've been ready for that for 11 years, she said. "It's just the first time I'm walking in without someone standing behind me claiming half the credit." "Go," he said. "I'll hear about it. I want to tell you about it myself." A beat. "Tonight, if that's okay." He looked at the stack of work orders on the bench beside him, at his own hands, at the ordinary texture of his ordinary day. "Yeah," he said. "That's okay." She hung up. He went back to work. The 1 o'clock address made the local news by 2. He didn't watch it live, but he saw a clip on his phone during his lunch break. 30 seconds, Victoria at a podium. 840 employees filling the floor below her and watching on screens above her, and she was steady and clear and completely herself. The version of herself that had nothing to perform and nothing to hide, and was just the person who built the thing talking to the people who ran it. The clip cut off before her last line. He'd have to hear that one from her. He picked up Emma at 3:20. She got in the car and immediately said, Is Victoria coming for dinner? I don't know yet. Can she? Emma. I'm just asking. I know you're just asking. Emma looked out the window. She said she was going to teach me how her grandmother made something. I forgot what it was. Something Polish. Her grandmother was Polish. She said her dad was from somewhere in Europe. I forgot. But she said her grandmother made this thing that was like a dumpling but different. Emma looked at him. That's not how pierogies sound. It's not. Maybe it's something else. Maybe. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, I like her dad. He kept his eyes on the road. I know you do. Do you like her? Emma? That's not a weird question. It's a complicated question. You always say that when you do like someone, but you don't want to say it yet. She crossed her arms. You said it about the neighbor's dog for 3 weeks before you admitted you liked the dog. The dog is very likable. So is Victoria. He didn't say anything. Emma looked satisfied with his silence, which was in her interpretation an answer. She went back to looking out the window. Victoria arrived at 5:48. She still had the blazer on, but the blazer looked different now, looser somehow, less like armor, and more like clothing, like the day had worn it in. She came in and set her bag down, and Emma was in the kitchen already, and said without looking up from the counter where she was doing homework, "Dad said you might come." He did. Emma looked up. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no, which is the same as yes. She looked at Noah. Right. That's a significant oversimplification of my communication style, he said. But I'm right. Victoria looked at him. He looked at his coffee. Emma went back to her homework. They made dinner together. The three of them in the kitchen, the specific easy chaos of a shared meal where someone was doing homework at the table while 2 adults cooked. And there was a thing about a show Emma wanted to watch after dinner that Noah said maybe, and Emma said that means yes, and Victoria said she'd brought something for dessert, a box from the bakery 2 blocks from her office, and Emma immediately abandoned the homework negotiation in favor of investigating the box. It was the most ordinary hour Noah had spent in a very long time. It was also the best. After Emma went to bed, they sat at the kitchen table, and Victoria told him about the company meeting. She said she'd stood up there and she'd told them the truth. Not the press version, not the board version. She said there was a betrayal. It was significant. It is handled. This company is yours. Every person in this room has built something real, and what was done to it was done without your knowledge, and it will never happen again. She said she'd told them about the parent support program expansion. She said when she got to that part, a woman in the 3rd row had started crying, which set off a small chain of other people, who were either crying or very deliberately not, and Victoria had stood at the podium and let it happen instead of moving past it. I let them feel it, she said. Usually I'd move on, keep the energy up. I let them feel it. Good, Noah said. It was... She stopped, looked at her hands. It was the most connected I've felt in that building in years. Standing up there being honest. Not performing confidence. Just being honest. She paused. I kept thinking about what you said. About Emma. About how she doesn't need managed, she needs witnessed. He looked at her. 840 people, she said. All of them needing to be witnessed, not managed. She folded her hands on the table. I've been managing them for 13 years. I think I need to learn the other thing. You'll figure it out. I figured out pierogies on the 2nd try, she said. I'm a fast learner. He smiled, a real one. She caught it and held it in her expression like something she was keeping. Then she said, I'm moving back home. Tomorrow. He nodded. I know. The house is just a house. It was his as much as mine for 11 years, and I need to make it mine or let it go. I haven't decided which yet. She looked at the table. But I need to go back. I need to be back in my life, not... She gestured slightly at the kitchen around her, hiding in someone else's. You weren't hiding, he said. You were recovering. Same address, different intention. She looked up. I want to be clear about something. He waited. This week was not something I do, she said. I've never shown up at someone's house. I've never let someone see me the way I let you see me. I've never sat at someone's kitchen table and talked about my father and my mother and my marriage and my breakdown and just... She stopped. I've never done any of this. I know, he said. I'm saying it because I want you to understand that what you saw this week was real. It wasn't a performance, and it wasn't desperation. It was just... She found the word me, actual me, which is something I've kept very well hidden for a very long time. He held her gaze. I know what I saw. What did you see? He thought about it honestly. The way he'd learned to think about things honestly, which was to not say the easy version or the protective version, but the true one. I saw someone who built something real and protected it, even when the cost was everything else. I saw someone who was kind to my daughter without trying. I saw someone who sent 12 sentences into the world when she was terrified because it was right. I saw someone who washes the dishes without being asked, and makes their bed, and reads faster than anyone I've ever met, and cries without making a sound. He paused. I saw someone worth knowing, which is what I told my mother. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. What did your mother say? She said invite her to dinner. Something crossed Victoria's face. Not quite a laugh, not quite a cry. Something that existed in the precise middle of those two things. The place where people lived, when they'd been through something hard and come out the other side, and the relief hadn't quite figured out what shape to take yet. I'd like that, she said. If that's, I'd like that. I'll set it up, he said. She nodded, looked at the table. Then, there's something I need to tell you. He waited. The housing program, she said. The one I built 4 years ago. I'm expanding it. I'm putting real money into it, not budget line money, but actual significant funding. She looked up. I want you to run it. He stared at her. Not instead of your job, she said quickly. Or maybe eventually instead of your job. Or as a different version of your job. I don't... She stopped, recollected. I'm not offering you this because of this week. I want to be completely clear about that. I've been thinking about this for 2 years, about who should actually be in charge of something like this, who would understand it from the inside rather than from a boardroom. She held his gaze. It's you. It's been you for a long time. I just didn't have a structure for it yet. The kitchen was very quiet. He thought about the list he'd made after the divorce. 3 pages. Every broken thing in the house. The way the fixing had given him something to hold on to when everything else was in free fall. He thought about the employees he knew, Ramirez, whose kid was in Emma's school, who drove 40 minutes each way because he couldn't afford anything closer. Donna in payroll, who'd been sleeping on her sister's couch for 4 months. The younger guys who called him when things went sideways, not because he was their supervisor, but because he'd always been the one who stayed. He thought about what it would mean to do that work, not just for one building, but for every building. Not just for the broken pipes and the failing circuits, but for the people on the other side of them. I'd need to understand the full scope, he said. I'll send you everything. Budget, framework, projected reach. You read it and you tell me what's wrong with it. Because something will be wrong with it, and I'd rather you tell me than find out when it doesn't work. I'll find a lot wrong with it. I'm counting on it. He looked at her steadily. This isn't you're not doing this because... Noah. Her voice was firm, not unkind, just firm. I built a company from nothing. I don't make personnel decisions based on personal feelings. I make them based on who is right for the work. She paused. You are right for this work. Those are separate facts. You can hold them separately or together, but they're both true. He sat with that, looked at his hands, looked at the table, looked at her. Okay, he said. Okay, you'll read it. Okay, I'll run it. He met her eyes. With conditions. Name them. I report directly to you, not a committee, not a department head. You. Because this kind of work disappears into bureaucracy, and I'm not doing it to watch it disappear. Done. And the people in the program have actual input on how it runs, not surveys, actual seats at the table. Done. And when something isn't working, I tell you and you listen before you decide. She looked at him. I always listen. You listen to things that confirm what you already think, he said. I've watched you all week. You're getting better at the other kind. I just want it in the agreement. She stared at him for a second. Then, you're the first person who has ever negotiated with me like that. Is it working? Infuriatingly well. She held out her hand. Deal. He shook it, her hand in his. Real and warm and present. They held it 1 second longer than a handshake required, then let go. 3 weeks passed, then 6. The legal proceedings moved through their stages, each one producing headlines that Noah read on his phone with the detachment of someone who had been inside the thing before it became news. Marcus's fraud charge was confirmed. His stake was voided. His name was removed from the company's founding documents, pending the court's final ruling, which everyone, including his own attorneys, expected to go one way. Hayes Global didn't collapse. The stock dipped for 4 days and then recovered. The press coverage of Victoria's personal statement generated more supportive response than the PR team had modeled, for which the PR team took as a learning experience, and which Victoria told Noah about with something that wasn't quite "I told you so," but lived in the same neighborhood. He started working on the housing program proposal in the evenings after Emma went to bed. He made lists the way he always made lists, specific, functional, organized by what could be done first and what required the other thing to happen before it could. He called Ramirez and asked him what would have made the last 3 years easier. He called Donna in payroll. He called 4 other people he knew well enough to ask real questions of and who trusted him enough to answer honestly. He sent Victoria the first draft on a Tuesday night at 11 o'clock with a note that said, "This is what's wrong with your framework." It ran 4 pages. She called him at 11:14. "I've been staring at this for 11 minutes, she said. "And you're right about all of it." A pause. "That's annoying." "You said you wanted honesty." "I did. I still do. It's just nobody gives me 4 pages of what's wrong anymore. Everyone gives me the version they think I want." "That's because they work for you," he said. "I work with you. Different relationship." Quiet on her end. Then, "Is that what this is? What would you call it?" She thought for a moment. "Something I don't have a category for," she said, which was what she'd said in the kitchen 6 weeks ago, and the fact that she'd remembered the exact words meant she'd been thinking about them, and they both knew that, and neither of them said it directly. "We'll figure out this category," he said, "when it's time." "Is it time?" He looked at the kitchen table, at Emma's latest drawing now on the refrigerator beside the old one, this one including a figure with dark hair that Emma had labeled in her best cursive Victoria, because she hadn't been sure how many letters. "Not yet," he said, "but it's getting there." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "The program. When can we launch?" 90 days if you give me what I asked for. 60 if you give me one more thing." "What's the one more thing?" "A conversation with the people who'll use it before we design the final structure. Not a focus group. Actual conversation. You in a room, them talking, you listening." A pause. "You want me to sit in a room and listen?" "For about 2 hours, yes." Noah. Victoria. A beat. Then, "When?" "I'll set it up," he said, and heard on the other end of the line the sound of her almost laughing. November arrived. The days got shorter. Emma started a new unit at school about communities which she found deeply interesting in a way that expressed itself as daily questions at the dinner table about what made a community real. Noah answered as honestly as he could, which Emma then cross-referenced against things she'd heard from Victoria on the phone, because Victoria had started calling on Tuesday evenings, which had begun as a check-in about the program, and had quietly evolved into something with no agenda at all, just 2 people talking, and Emma had started appearing at the edge of the kitchen during these calls, with an expression of complete innocence that fooled nobody. One Tuesday, Victoria called, and Emma answered the phone before Noah could get to it, and he heard his daughter say, "Hi, he's in the backyard. Did you know that bees can recognize faces? We learned that today. Hold on." She appeared in the doorway. "Dad, it's Victoria." Still the spelling. He dried his hands, took the phone. "Hey." "Bees can recognize faces," Victoria said. "Apparently. I did not know that. Emma is going to make sure you do." He sat at the kitchen table. "How was your day?" She told him. He told her about his. Emma hovered in the doorway long enough to contribute 2 additional bee facts and then retreated upstairs satisfied. This was how it went. Not all at once. Not with declarations or turning points or a single moment you could point to. Just Tuesday calls and a program taking shape, and Emma drawing a figure with dark hair on the refrigerator, and Noah's mother making Sunday dinner and setting 5 places before anyone told her to. The day Victoria came to that dinner, she stood in Noah's mother's kitchen and watched the older woman move through it the way his mother moved through kitchens, with the authority of someone who had cooked in one place for 40 years and knew every inch of it without looking, and something in Victoria went quiet in the good way. The way she went quiet when things were right. Noah's mother, whose name was Carol, and who was 73, and had the directness of someone who had earned the right to it, said to Victoria over the soup, "He doesn't let people in." Victoria looked at her. Then at Noah. Noah said, "Mom." "I'm just telling her what she should know." Carol looked at Victoria steadily. "He's been careful for 3 years," which was right. But careful can become a habit. She ladled more soup. "You're the first person he's mentioned twice. I'm noting that." Emma, who had been very still during this exchange, said, "He mentioned her like 15 times. "Emma," Noah said. "I'm just being accurate." Victoria looked at Noah across the table. He looked back. He did not look away. He let her see what was there, what had been there since that first morning over scrambled eggs growing slowly, the way things grew when they were real. Taking the time they needed, not faster or slower than what they were. She looked at him like someone who had spent a long time expecting to be disappointed and was learning slowly to be surprised instead. Carol said, "Eat your soup, both of you." They ate their soup. 6 months after the night, Noah Carter came home to find the most powerful woman in Seattle asleep under his daughter's dinosaur quilt. He stood in the doorway of the guest room that had been repainted twice, once by himself, once with Emma supervising. And he thought about what that room had held. The suitcase, the designer coat, the perfume that had lingered for 3 days after she left, the shape of someone deciding in the dark of someone else's house to stop running. Victoria appeared beside him. Not staying over, she didn't stay over. Not yet, not with Emma there. They'd talked about that and agreed without it being a difficult conversation. But she'd come for dinner and stayed late the way she did on some nights, and Emma was already asleep, and they'd been standing in the hallway outside Emma's room, listening to the silence that meant a child was deeply and genuinely out. She looked at the guest room. "You painted it." "Emma chose the color. It's very yellow." "She said it needed to be warm." He looked at it. She wasn't wrong. Victoria stood beside him in the hallway, close enough that he could have reached for her hand. He didn't yet. But the distance between could have, and did, was getting smaller every week, the way distances did when 2 people were moving toward each other without rushing. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Ask." She turned to face him. "Last year you told me that you got better at being present because Emma needed you to be witnessed, not managed." She paused. "Have I?" She stopped. Found the right version. "Am I someone you feel like you have to manage? Or is this—" She gestured slightly between them. "Something else." He looked at her. The woman who had walked into his house broken and walked out of it a week later with her evidence filed and her statement released and 12 sentences in the world that said, "I was afraid, and I got help, and I am not ashamed." The woman who had built something real and protected it and was still 6 months later learning that real things could be protected without walls. The woman his daughter had named in crayon with the wrong number of letters and loved with complete certainty. Something else, he said. She looked at him. What kind of something else? The kind worth taking slow, he said. The kind worth getting right. She held his gaze. Then she said quietly, I asked you last November if it was time. You did. You said not yet, but getting there. She looked at him. Are we there? He looked at her. At the yellow guest room behind her. At Emma's door down the hall. At the framed drawings visible through the kitchen doorway. At all of it, the small house with the fixed steps and the solid bookshelf and the warm light and the ceramic frog on the windowsill that Emma had made in 3rd grade and presented like a masterpiece. Yeah, he said. We're there. She didn't move toward him dramatically. She didn't need to. She just exhaled slowly the last of some long-held breath and looked at him the way she'd looked at him that first morning over scrambled eggs, like something she hadn't expected to find and wasn't sure she was allowed to keep. He reached out and took her hand. She looked down at it, then up at him. Then she said in the voice she used when things were real, Can I stay? The same words, different meaning, the same house, different season. The same man standing in a hallway, the one who fixed things and stayed late and turned down bonuses and packed lunchboxes and sat outside closed doors because he didn't know what to say, but knew that being there was the whole of what was needed. He looked at her. You already did, he said, and that was the truth, and the truth held the way things held when they were built. Right, not perfect, not without cracks, not without the long, patient work of two people choosing each other, one ordinary day at a time, but solid, real, the kind that lasted. Because the greatest homes are not built with walls and money and the right address. They are built by people who have been broken and chose with full knowledge of what breaking costs to stay.